Welcome to Sleepy Stories. In this episode, we will take a clear and steady look at the hidden code of meaning, the way symbols quietly shape how we think, speak, and remember. This story is designed to help you learn while you rest. If sleep does not come right away, that is completely fine. You can still enjoy learning interesting scientific facts before sleep. Simply listen, let your breathing slow, and allow the information to settle at its own pace. Across every culture and era, human beings have filled their surroundings with marks, sounds, and gestures that stand for something else. From the earliest scratches on cave walls to the icons that glow on our screens, we translate experience into signs. A spiral carved in stone might have marked a season, a hunt, or a prayer. Today, a small symbol on a device can open a world of data. Though centuries apart, both serve the same purpose: compressing thought into form. Neuroscience offers a clear explanation for this capacity. Inside the brain, billions of neurons form connections that constantly seek patterns. When light enters the eyes, visual areas translate contrast and contour into recognizable shapes. Those shapes activate networks that link memory, emotion, and language. A circle is not only geometry, it can recall the sun, a ring, or the passage of time. The firing of cells becomes interpretation, and interpretation becomes meaning. This drive for pattern recognition gave early humans a crucial advantage. A faint rustle in grass could mean danger, a trail of prints could lead to food. Over generations, the ability to read signs extended beyond survival. People began to notice beauty and order in the patterns themselves. Stars that seemed to form figures, waves that echoed rhythm, stones arranged as boundaries. Perception turned into imagination, and imagination into communication. Anthropology shows that symbolic behavior is one of the defining features of our species. Beads, pigments, and carvings from tens of thousands of years ago reveal abstract thinking long before written language. These early artifacts demonstrate planning and shared understanding, evidence that meaning could exist beyond the immediate present. A painted hand on a cave wall was not merely decoration, it was a declaration. I was here. I am part of something larger. Psychology adds another layer. Humans experience an instinct known as pareidolia, seeing faces in clouds or shapes in shadows. This tendency reflects the brain's need to impose structure on randomness. It can mislead, but it also fuels creativity. The same neural mechanism that finds an animal in drifting clouds allows artists to invent new forms and scientists to imagine unseen forces. Symbolic thought is, in this sense, both the source of myth and the engine of discovery. In everyday life, symbols guide our behavior constantly. A traffic light, a wedding ring, a national emblem, each delivers meaning instantly, without words. This efficiency relies on shared convention. Everyone agrees that red means stop, that a ring on a certain finger means union, that a flag represents a group. Without such consensus, society would slow to confusion. Symbols turn cooperation into a reflex. Modern research into semiotics, the study of signs, shows that meaning always arises from relationships between object, concept, and observer. A mark alone says nothing until someone interprets it. That act of interpretation is what links brains into culture. In decoding a symbol, each person rehearses the same mental dance performed by ancestors thousands of generations ago. As you rest, consider how effortlessly your own mind performs this translation. Words flow into understanding, images awaken emotion, patterns trigger memory. You live inside a continuous exchange of symbols, interpreting and creating them without pause. They are the silent framework of thought, the architecture of connection between self and world. And now, as your breathing evens and the sounds around you fade into softness, let this realization settle gently. Every line, color, or gesture you encounter carries more than it seems. Within it lies the shared code of humanity, a quiet conversation stretching from the first spark of consciousness to the moment you drift into sleep. The story of symbolism begins not with language, but with perception. Long before a word was spoken or written, our ancestors were decoding the environment, recognizing patterns that meant safety, danger, or opportunity. The ability to see order within chaos became a survival skill, transforming observation into understanding. Each rustle in the tall grass, each trail pressed into soft ground, was an early form of message waiting to be read. Modern neuroscience helps explain why this instinct runs so deep. The visual cortex of the brain processes incoming light into edges, shapes, and movement. At higher levels, networks integrate those details into coherent images, comparing them against stored memories. When something familiar appears, the curve of a predator's back or the outline of ripe fruit, the brain's predictive circuits fire in anticipation. Recognition arrives before full awareness, allowing reaction within fractions of a second. The same mechanisms that once guided hunting and protection now help us navigate complex modern worlds of signs and screens. Psychologists call this the pattern recognition bias. It drives us to find meaning even where none exists. The human mind links sounds, sights, and sensations into narratives because uncertainty feels unsafe. This habit gave rise to myths explaining thunder, constellations, or disease, yet it also laid the groundwork for science, the disciplined search to confirm which patterns are real. Our tendency to connect dots, even imaginary ones, is both a gift and a challenge. Anthropology provides tangible traces of this mental evolution. The earliest symbolic objects, painted shells, notched bones, and marked stones, appear in archaeological layers more than 70,000 years old. They show a deliberate act of marking, a choice to distinguish one object from another. Counting notches may have tracked the days or the phases of the moon. Lines carved into ochre were no longer merely scratches, they were signals, early steps toward abstraction. Constellations in the night sky are another testament to this impulse. The stars themselves are scattered across vast, unrelated distances, yet people everywhere saw shapes among them: hunters, bears, serpents, and birds. These patterns became calendars for agriculture and navigation, guiding travelers across deserts and oceans. Though purely imaginative, they organized both time and direction. Even now, the constellations we learn as children are echoes of ancient symbolic thinking projected onto the heavens. In modern life, the same brain that once spotted predators in the brush now reads patterns in digital data, facial expressions, or social signals. Neuroscientists note that apophenia, perceiving patterns in randomness, can lead to creativity, superstition, or error, depending on context. The artist, the gambler, and the scientist all share the same cognitive engine. What differs is how they test and refine its output. From a biological perspective, symbols began as shortcuts. The brain compresses sensory complexity into manageable representations. A rustle becomes predator, a certain color becomes food, a particular smell becomes home. Over generations, those neural shortcuts evolved into cultural symbols. A drawn animal could stand for the hunt, a carved mark could represent ownership, a gesture could express peace or threat. Each step condensed experience into shared code. What began as instinct turned into imagination. The difference between recognizing a shape and assigning it meaning marks the threshold of symbolic thought, a leap that made humans unique among animals. To interpret is to predict, but also to dream. Once the mind learned to connect signs to unseen concepts, it could link stars into myths, seasons into calendars, and sounds into language. As you rest, Imagine those early humans gazing at embers fading in a dark cave, tracing meaning in flickering light. In that glow, the first symbols were born, not from artifice, but from the same neural rhythm that still moves within you when you see a pattern and sense that it matters. The code of recognition, written into the architecture of the brain, is the quiet beginning of every language ever spoken. Every time you read a word, see an image, or hear a familiar tone, your brain performs a remarkable translation. It turns raw sensation into meaning. The science that studies this process is called semiotics, a discipline devoted to understanding how signs work. Semiotics shows that communication is not just about transmitting sound or vision, it is about transforming experience into a shared symbolic structure that connects one mind to another. Two thinkers laid the foundations for this field, Ferdinand de Saussure in Switzerland and Charles Sanders Peirce in the United States. Working independently in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, they explored why a mark or sound can represent something else. Saussure saw every sign as made of two parts: the signifier, the form, such as a sound or shape, and the signified, the idea it evokes. Their relationship is arbitrary, based not on resemblance, but on agreement. The word tree has no physical link to the living plant. Its meaning survives only because communities consent to it. Peirce approached the same question differently. He classified signs into three categories: icons, indices, and symbols. Icons resemble what they stand for. A portrait mirrors a face. A map outlines territory. Indices point through direct connection. Smoke signals fire. Footprints mark presence. Symbols rely entirely on convention. Words, numbers, and flags function only because their users agree on meaning. Together, Peirce's and Saussure's ideas explain the full spectrum of how humans link sign to sense. Cognitive science now supports what these philosophers intuited. The human brain treats every act of interpretation as pattern matching. When you read, the visual cortex decodes shapes, the auditory cortex recalls the sound, and association areas retrieve meaning from memory. This happens in fractions of a second, yet it represents centuries of cultural learning. The connection between sign and idea, once taught, becomes nearly automatic. A child must learn that a red octagon means stop, but once learned, the symbol triggers instant response even without words. Semiotics also reveals the flexibility of meaning. A sign can shift context and value as culture changes. Consider the simple heart shape. Once a symbol of physical anatomy, it gradually became an emblem of love, then of charity, then a universal icon for like. Its power lies not in any fixed definition but in its capacity to evolve. Every generation rewrites the code of symbols to match its worldview. The importance of semiotics extends far beyond language. In art, it explains why a color or gesture can move us. In music, it shows how notes arranged in pattern convey joy or tension. In computer science, it underlies the logic of programming, where symbols direct machines to act. Even mathematics, seemingly detached from emotion, is a vast symbolic system. Numbers and operators representing abstract relationships that can predict the motion of galaxies. Yet semiotics is more than academic theory. It reflects how the brain naturally organizes perception. Each moment of awareness is a negotiation between external reality and internal interpretation. We never encounter the world directly. We meet it through signs, filtered by memory and culture. To live as a human being is to dwell inside an invisible web of meanings, translating and being translated constantly. Understanding this can bring both humility and wonder. Every gesture, every mark on a page, every sound of language is part of a global experiment in shared meaning. When you read these lines, you are participating in that experiment, decoding symbols shaped by countless generations before you. Through them, thoughts travel from one time and place to another, unchanged by distance. alive only because someone understands the code. And so the story of semiotics is, in essence, the story of connection. Symbols are bridges between eye and mind, between speaker and listener, between centuries of human thought. To study them is to glimpse the hidden structure of understanding itself, the quiet mechanism by which imagination becomes communication. Across the span of human history, certain images return again and again. They appear in myths, art, religion, and even dreams, recurring forms that seem older than any single story. Psychologists call them archetypes, and anthropologists recognize them as the shared, symbolic patterns that connect people across cultures and eras. They are not copied ideas, but resonances of the same human experiences repeated in countless variations. Carl Jung proposed that these archetypes arise from what he called the collective unconscious, a deep psychological layer containing universal templates of experience. Whether or not one accepts this theory in full, the evidence for recurring symbolic themes is clear. In every civilization, there are tales of the hero who journeys through trial to transformation, of the nurturing mother who protects and restores, of the wise guide who offers insight, and of the shadow that must be faced before renewal can occur. These motifs appear in Greek myth, Native American legend, African folk tales, and modern cinema alike, evolving yet remaining recognizably human. Anthropology provides a practical explanation. Cultures may be separated by oceans, but all people share the same basic needs: food, safety, belonging, love, and meaning. The same natural forces shape daily life: sunrise and sunset, growth and decay, storm and calm. Symbols arise from these shared encounters with the world. The ocean becomes a metaphor for mystery, mountains for endurance, fire for transformation. Over time, such metaphors crystallize into stable archetypes, the grammar of human storytelling. Science adds another perspective through cognitive psychology. The brain organizes information by analogy. When faced with new experiences, it searches memory for patterns that fit. This process naturally produces symbolic condensation, single images that stand for entire emotional or social situations. A circle might represent unity, a serpent rebirth, a road the passage through life. Archetypes, in this view, are mental efficiencies, shortcuts for processing complexity. Culture continually reshapes these primal images. The hero in one era may be a warrior, in another a healer or scientist. The mother may appear as goddess, earth, or even machine, but the emotional structure remains intact. The trickster, once embodied in ancient gods, reappears today in comedians and provocateurs who disrupt norms to reveal hidden truths. The persistence of these figures suggests that symbolic imagination is as adaptive as biology itself. Art and literature are the most visible theatres of this repetition. From Homer's Odyssey to modern films, the same symbolic skeleton underlies stories of courage, loss, and self-discovery. The power of these narratives lies in recognition. Even when the setting is alien or futuristic, the underlying journey feels familiar. Neuroscientists observing brain activity during storytelling find patterns of empathy and anticipation that align with these universal structures. The mind responds to archetypes not because they are taught, but because they echo innate emotional maps. Cultural diversity adds richness to the pattern. A dragon may signify wisdom in China and chaos in medieval Europe. Water may cleanse in one tradition and threaten in another. Yet beneath these differences, the emotional core, transformation, danger, renewal, remains constant. The variation is linguistic, the meaning is universal. This is why people from vastly different backgrounds can feel moved by each other's myths and art. The symbols may differ in form, but they speak the same psychological language. Recognizing archetypes does not reduce them to formula, it deepens their resonance. They remind us that imagination is not isolated within individuals but woven through humanity as a shared inheritance. Every person who tells a story, paints an image, or dreams at night draws from the same deep reservoir of symbols. To see this connection is to understand that culture is not a collection of separate voices but a long conversation across time. As you rest, picture those ancient storytellers gathered around firelight, shaping tales from the same fears and hopes that still move us today. Their words, now lost, still ripple through your mind whenever you see the hero rise, the mother comfort, or the shadow transform. Archetypes are the echoes of countless lives, the shared memory of what it means to be human. Every thought you form depends on connections. The human mind understands new things by linking them to what it already knows. This is the essence of metaphor, not just a poetic ornament, but a cognitive tool that structures how people reason, feel, and communicate. When you say you grasp an idea or see your point, you are mapping physical experience onto abstraction. In that mapping lies one of the most profound symbolic mechanisms of the brain. Cognitive linguists such as George Lakoff and Mark Johnson have shown that metaphors are the scaffolding of human understanding. Their research demonstrates that everyday language, and therefore thought, relies on a limited set of deep conceptual metaphors. We speak of time as a resource, spend it, save it, of life as a journey, find your path, hit a dead end, and of argument as war, defend your point, attack the claim. These phrases are not accidents, they reveal the structure of reasoning itself. Once a metaphor becomes embedded, it shapes how entire societies perceive reality. Neuroscience adds physical evidence to this theory. Brain imaging shows that when a person hears a metaphor grounded in sensory experience, a warm smile or a rough day, the same neural regions involved in touch and temperature activate. The body participates in understanding. The mind does not operate in isolation. It relies on bodily experience as the raw material from which abstraction is built. This is why metaphors feel intuitive. They are born from motion, sight, sound, and sensation. Science, too, is saturated with metaphor. Atoms are described as miniature solar systems. Electrical currents flow. DNA is a code. These images are not literal, yet they make invisible processes imaginable. They allow the intellect to cross the gap between what is seen and what is conceived. Without metaphors, complex knowledge would remain inaccessible, trapped within formulas and numbers. With them, abstract ideas take shape in the mind's eye. Metaphors also influence emotion. When a person says they are carrying a heavy burden, the metaphor activates regions associated with physical weight and effort. This is why such expressions feel viscerally true. The same networks of muscle and perception that register strain also respond to the symbolic description of difficulty. Metaphor fuses thought and feeling, logic and empathy into a single process of understanding. Yet every metaphor is selective. By highlighting one aspect of experience, it hides another. If time is money, then idleness seems wasteful rather than restorative. If argument is war, then the goal becomes victory, not understanding. Recognizing these frameworks allows people to choose their metaphors consciously, to see that ways of speaking also shape ways of living. Changing a metaphor can change perception itself. When time is seen as a river, it flows and renews. When life is seen as a garden, it invites care instead of conquest. Cultures evolve distinct metaphorical systems that reflect environment and history. Languages of desert peoples are rich in metaphors of wind and sand. Maritime societies draw from tides and stars. Yet despite local color, certain metaphors recur everywhere. Light for knowledge, darkness for ignorance, ascent for hope, descent for despair. These universals suggest that metaphor springs from shared human embodiment, the physics of living in gravity, the experience of day and night, the rhythm of breath and heartbeat. In literature and art, metaphors take on deliberate aesthetic life. A voyage across the sea becomes a search for meaning. A locked door becomes a symbol of secrecy. The poet stretches the mind's associative fabric, inviting readers to see one thing through the lens of another. But even outside art, metaphor operates silently. Every map, model, and diagram is metaphorical, translating reality into a different form for the sake of clarity. The next time you encounter a familiar expression, the tip of the iceberg, a ray of hope, a turning point, consider what it reveals about the mind's architecture. Each phrase is a bridge between sensory experience and abstract reasoning, a piece of cognitive engineering refined over millennia. Through metaphor, the brain transforms perception into comprehension, grounding thought in the body and connecting imagination to truth. As you rest, you might notice how easily one idea drifts into another, how memory and imagination merge. That gentle fluidity is metaphor at work, the same mechanism that allows you to think, dream, and understand the world by resemblance. In every connection you make, the code of meaning grows richer, weaving your own thoughts into the endless network of symbols that defines human understanding. Every shade you see carries both a physical and emotional story. Color is one of nature's most immediate languages, a system that speaks directly to the senses before the mind even begins to interpret. Light enters the eye as waves of energy, striking photoreceptor cells called cones, each tuned to a different range of wavelengths. The brain blends these signals into the vast palette we experience as color. Yet what we perceive is not only physics, it is perception shaped by memory, culture, and emotion. In this way, color becomes one of the most powerful symbolic systems humanity has ever known. Scientific understanding tells us that color does not exist in the external world as we see it. Objects absorb and reflect specific wavelengths of light, but color arises only when those wavelengths meet the neural circuits of the brain. Still, across species and civilizations, color holds meaning. The red of blood or flame demands attention. The blue of the distant sky suggests calm and expanse. The green of vegetation signals safety and renewal. These biological associations predate civilization, yet every culture builds upon them with its own symbolic vocabulary. Anthropologists studying color symbolism find striking diversity. In many Eastern traditions, red signifies luck, joy, and prosperity. In others, it warns of danger or sacrifice. White, often associated with purity in Western societies, symbolizes mourning in parts of Asia. Black can denote strength, elegance, or death, depending on context. These shifting meanings reveal that color operates as a cultural code, flexible yet deeply felt. It communicates not through words but through shared emotional experience. Psychology demonstrates how color influences behavior and perception. In controlled experiments, people shown red tend to react faster and with heightened alertness. Blue environments foster calm and concentration. Marketers use these effects deliberately. Restaurants favor warm hues to stimulate appetite. Hospitals choose soft greens and blues to ease anxiety. Our responses are physiological but also learned, shaped by repetition and social association. Over time, color becomes both signal and suggestion. Art history shows how painters and designers have long used this dual nature of color to convey emotion. The golden halos of medieval icons symbolized divinity. The deep blues of Renaissance frescoes evoked heavenly depth. The stark contrasts of modern art express tension and transformation. Even abstract compositions rely on the psychological resonance of hue, a language beyond form, understood by intuition rather than translation. Scientists analyzing visual processing confirm that color perception activates both sensory and emotional centers, explaining why art can move us without a single recognizable image. Nature itself remains the ultimate teacher of this language. The crimson of sunset signals transition. The white of snow signifies stillness and silence. The multi-hued flash of a butterfly's wings warns predators or invites mates. Evolution has encoded these meanings over millions of years, refining perception into instinct. Humans inherited that sensitivity, then elevated it into symbolism, using pigment, fabric, and light to express feeling, faith, and identity. Color also shapes memory. Studies show that emotionally charged hues are recalled more vividly than neutral ones. The red of a childhood toy, or the blue of an old uniform, can summon decades-old emotions in an instant. This neurological anchoring gives color its symbolic permanence. Once linked to emotion, it becomes a shorthand for experience. In a world now filled with artificial light and digital screens, color's symbolism continues to evolve. Designers craft new palettes for clarity on glowing surfaces, while technology extends vision beyond the visible spectrum into infrared and ultraviolet. Yet, even as our tools expand perception, the emotional core remains unchanged. Color still guides mood, signals importance, and connects sensation to meaning. As your eyes grow heavy, imagine the soft gradient of twilight, that quiet hour when blue deepens into indigo and the day's bright signals fade to calm. In those gentle tones, the physics of light and the psychology of feeling meet in harmony. Each hue around you, from the warmth of a lamp to the cool trace of shadow, speaks in the silent but ancient language of color, a language the mind has been reading since the first dawn of awareness. Before writing, before color, and even before speech, there were forms. The human mind has always found comfort in geometry, circles, triangles, spirals, and lines that seem to echo both nature and thought. Shapes are among the earliest symbols we encounter as children, and they remain among the most enduring. They do not depend on translation or culture. Their meanings are absorbed intuitively. The brain's visual system recognizes them instantly, long before we can name what we see. A shape, even in silence, can stir recognition, emotion, and memory. Scientists studying perception describe how quickly this happens. The visual cortex reduces what the eyes receive into basic geometric information, edges, contours, and symmetry. These elemental forms are processed faster than texture or detail. Our ancestors depended on that speed. A round face meant safety or threat. A sharp angle might signal a fang, a weapon, or a rock. Over millennia, those responses evolved into subtle symbolic associations. Rounded shapes still feel gentle and safe, angular ones dynamic or dangerous. Every object we design, from buildings to logos, unconsciously plays on these ancient instincts. The circle is perhaps the most universal of all shapes. Found in the sun, the moon, and the iris of the eye, it has symbolized wholeness, eternity, and unity for thousands of years. In sacred art, it represents perfection without beginning or end, a reflection of cycles in nature, from the turning of seasons to the rhythm of breath. Modern psychology associates circles with inclusion and protection, which is why communities, from families to nations, often gather around circular forms, fires, tables, emblems. Even planets themselves follow circular orbits, making this shape not only symbolic but cosmically literal. The triangle, by contrast, conveys movement and direction. Its 3 points imply stability when balanced, yet energy when tilted or inverted. Ancient societies saw it as a sign of power or divinity, representing elements or trinities. Architects still rely on the triangle's structural strength, and designers use it to suggest ascent, hierarchy, or change. Because of its sharpness, the triangle can also feel assertive or even aggressive, a visual metaphor for striving upward or piercing through resistance. The square and rectangle offer solidity and order. Their equal sides and right angles symbolize reliability, making them ideal for architecture, writing tablets, and modern screens. To the human eye, a square feels grounded, a visual representation of balance and control. It invites trust, but can also suggest limitation, confinement, or rigidity. Psychologically, squares appeal to reason, just as circles appeal to emotion. Then there is the spiral, the bridge between geometry and growth. Found in shells, galaxies, and hurricanes, it represents expansion, evolution, and transformation. Anthropologists have discovered spiral carvings in prehistoric sites around the world, evidence that early humans sensed in this shape something fundamental about life's continuous unfolding. In neuroscience, the spiral mirrors the structure of the cochlea, the organ of hearing, reminding us that even perception is built upon nature's recurring designs. Gestalt psychology explains why shapes carry such strong symbolic power. The brain does not see isolated points. It organizes them into wholes, guided by principles like proximity, closure, and symmetry. When we see a few curved lines, we perceive a circle. A few converging angles become a triangle. Once the mind completes a shape, meaning follows automatically. Designers, artists, and architects use this perceptual tendency to evoke feelings without words. A rounded logo feels friendly, a jagged one feels bold. Geometry becomes emotional communication. Cultural context adds further nuance. In Buddhist mandalas, circles represent enlightenment. In Christian art, triangles symbolize the divine trinity. In Islamic patterns, interlacing geometry reflects infinity and unity. Yet even stripped of religion or art, these forms remain powerful precisely because they are rooted in perception itself. They speak the shared visual language of all humans. As you rest, let your thoughts drift through these shapes, a gentle circle expanding and contracting with your breath, a stable square beneath you, a rising triangle guiding your attention upward. Each form carries its quiet resonance, the echo of both nature and mind. In their stillness, they remind us that meaning often begins not in words, but in the silent architecture of vision, shapes that have spoken to humanity since the first light fell on open eyes. Human life moves in cycles, days and nights, seasons and years, beginnings and endings. Within these repeating patterns, meaning takes root. Repetition is not merely a rhythm of time, it is the mechanism through which symbols acquire power. A single gesture or sound may hold little weight in isolation, but when performed again and again, it gathers significance, transforming action into ritual and memory into continuity. Anthropologists studying ceremony have long noted that repetition is the core of ritual behavior. Lighting a candle once is simple utility. Lighting it every year on the same date becomes remembrance. The first greeting handshake is introduction. The 1000th handshake between friends becomes trust. Repetition transforms motion into message. It reinforces social bonds and links individuals to collective identity. Whether in sacred temples or daily routines, repetition keeps meaning alive by embedding it in muscle, sound, and expectation. Neuroscience offers a clear biological explanation for this symbolic persistence. Each time an action or image is repeated, neural pathways strengthen through a process called long-term potentiation. The brain becomes more efficient at recognizing and recalling patterns. Over time, the act feels natural, automatic, and meaningful. The repetition of symbolic acts ingrains both recognition and emotion, so that even a small cue, a scent, a melody, a familiar phrase, can awaken memories long dormant. This is why cultural symbols survive centuries. They are stored not only in artifacts but in neural circuits shared across generations. In religious and cultural life, repetition forms the foundation of ceremony. Chanting prayers, walking pilgrim routes, bowing, lighting lamps, these actions connect the body to invisible meanings. The physical rhythm synchronizes groups, producing what psychologists call collective effervescence, a state of shared emotion and unity. Through repetition, belief becomes embodied. Even when words are forgotten, the movements retain their symbolic charge. The faithful may not analyze each gesture. The gesture itself carries memory. Yet repetition also defines the secular world. The national anthem played before games, the ringing of bells at midday, the daily ritual of morning coffee. Each pattern reassures the mind through familiarity. It marks time, signaling order amid chaos. Marketers understand this deeply. Repeated exposure to a logo or slogan builds familiarity that the brain mistakes for trust. Whether sacred or commercial, repetition is the bridge between recognition and acceptance. Anthropologist Clifford Geertz described rituals as models of meaning, frameworks that both reflect and shape how people interpret the world. Through repetition, they do not simply commemorate beliefs, they create them anew each time. A repeated symbol is not static, it is performed into existence. Every echo reaffirms its message, yet allows subtle transformation, keeping tradition flexible enough to survive. However, repetition has a shadow side. When performed without awareness, it can empty a symbol of vitality. A ritual can become mere habit, a word spoken without conviction, a gesture stripped of emotion. Psychologists note that consciousness renews meaning. When awareness fades, symbols risk erosion. Revitalizing them requires attention, remembering why an act matters, not just how it is done. Meaning, like a flame, survives only when tended. Repetition also shapes personal life. The quiet pattern of daily routines, the walk, the journal, the shared meal, creates symbolic anchors for identity. Each repetition says, "This is who I am." These small rituals offer stability amid uncertainty, providing rhythm to thought and space for reflection. Even science relies on repetition. Experiments repeated yield reliability. Formulas rehearsed become second nature. In every domain, repetition turns knowledge into structure, intention into memory. Imagine the subtle comfort of recurring sounds, the steady ticking of a clock, the ebb and flow of your breath, the faint pulse of a heartbeat. These repetitions form the background music of existence, symbols of continuity that soothe the mind. In noticing them, you join a rhythm as old as life itself. The pattern does not demand attention, it invites calm. As repetition guides every culture and every individual, it teaches a simple truth. Meaning deepens not through novelty but through return. Each gesture revisited, each sound remembered, becomes another thread woven into the long, steady fabric of understanding. Before there were words, there was rhythm. The heartbeat within the womb, the rustle of leaves, the crack of thunder, sound has always been the most immediate signal of presence and change. Long before alphabets or writing systems, human beings listened to the world as if it were speaking in tone and vibration. Over time, these vibrations evolved into symbols of communication: drums across valleys, bells in temples, horns announcing danger, and later, songs expressing love or grief. Sound became both messenger and meaning. Physics describes sound as simple oscillation, waves of compressed air moving through space, but biology and culture give it significance. The ear converts those waves into electrical impulses, and the brain interprets them not only as noise, but as pattern. A melody activates areas linked to memory and emotion, explaining why music can make us cry or calm us. The auditory cortex works in synchrony with the limbic system, turning vibration into feeling. Sound, in this way, bridges the material and emotional worlds. Anthropologists note that every society has used sound symbolically. Bells mark time and transition. Drums coordinate movement in ceremonies and battles alike. Chanting unites voices in collective rhythm, transforming many into one. A call to prayer, a church hymn, a shamanic song, each uses repetition and tone to shift consciousness. When many people sing together, their heartbeats and breathing often synchronize, a physiological manifestation of unity. The sound becomes a living symbol of connection. Silence, too, carries meaning. In moments of mourning, reverence, or concentration, silence communicates what words cannot. It can symbolize respect, peace, or even resistance. Entire cultures have developed rituals of silence, a bowed head, a pause before speech, a quiet vigil after loss. Neurologically, silence activates the brain's default mode network, encouraging reflection and memory consolidation. Within silence, the mind reorders itself. It is not emptiness but space, the negative form of sound that allows meaning to emerge. Music integrates both principles, alternating tone and pause, creating emotion through contrast. Each note depends on silence before and after it. Scientists studying rhythm find that predictable patterns of sound can lower stress hormones and stabilize heart rate. This is why lullabies soothe infants and why steady drumming can induce trance. Sound is not just heard, it is felt in the nervous system, a resonance between inner rhythm and outer vibration. Modern life surrounds us with designed sound symbols. A phone's chime announces connection, a siren demands attention, a clock's tick marks passing time. Each signal is a learned language of association. The meaning of a doorbell or an ambulance horn depends entirely on convention, yet our reactions are immediate and visceral. In emergencies, sound is the fastest communicator, capable of transcending language barriers. Designers of alarms and notifications study psychoacoustics to ensure that tones are both recognizable and effective. Even in digital spaces, the symbolism of sound persists. The soft click of a keyboard, the startup chime of a computer, or the gentle ping of a message all serve as emotional cues. These noises may last only milliseconds, but they shape how we experience technology, reassuring, alerting, or connecting us. They remind us that even in a world of visual symbols, the ear remains an essential interpreter of meaning. Silence, however, has become rarer. Modern environments hum with engines, machines, and voices. Yet when silence returns, in a forest, a library, or a late-night room, it feels sacred. Studies show that periods of quiet can lower blood pressure and enhance creativity. In this way, silence itself becomes a healing symbol, a reminder that meaning grows in the spaces between sounds. As you rest, let your attention drift toward the sounds around you, distant traffic, the faint whir of air, the soft rhythm of your breathing. Each is a signal of continuity, a pattern that connects you to the living world. Between them lies the quiet that renews understanding. In that balance between vibration and stillness, the language of sound and silence unfolds, an ancient code written not on paper, but in air and time. Symbols guide thought, but they can also misguide it. Because meaning depends on context, the same sign that unites one group may confuse or offend another. A gesture meant as friendly, a color meant as pure, an emblem meant as sacred. Each can shift its sense when moved across cultures or generations. When this happens, symbols reveal their most human quality. They are living agreements, not fixed truths. Anthropologists document countless examples. In some cultures, showing the open palm is a greeting. In others, it is an insult. A nod may mean yes in one language and no in another. The swastika, once a sign of good fortune in ancient India, and among early Native American tribes, became in the 20th century a symbol of hatred and destruction. Its form did not change, only its context did. Through history, meanings are rewritten by those who use them or misuse them. Psychology explains this flexibility as a side effect of cognition. The mind works through association. When an image appears repeatedly alongside certain emotions or events, it absorbs their tone. Over time, the symbol and the feeling merge. This process, called classical conditioning, gives symbols their persuasive power, but also their vulnerability. Once linked to trauma or propaganda, a sign may never again recover neutrality. The red flag that once meant warning may come to mean revolution. The song of unity may recall loss. Memory transforms meaning. Even color, one of the most basic symbolic systems, can deceive through context. White is a symbol of purity at a wedding, but of death in many funerals across Asia. Black may be mourning in Europe, but power and sophistication in fashion. The signal remains the same wavelength of light. What changes is the cultural lens through which it is viewed. This relativity makes symbols adaptable but also unstable. Technology multiplies these ambiguities. Emojis, for instance, travel globally but are interpreted locally. A folded hands emoji can mean thank you, prayer, or high five, depending on region. A smiley face might seem kind to one person and sarcastic to another. The speed of digital communication leaves little room for context, making misunderstanding almost inevitable. In this way, the newest symbols behave much like the oldest: fluid, unpredictable, and alive. Philosophers of meaning, from Wittgenstein to Eco, have argued that every act of interpretation carries risk. To read a symbol is to make a choice among possibilities, guided by one's own experience. Two people can look at the same image and see entirely different worlds. Semiotics calls this polysemy, the coexistence of multiple meanings within one sign. Far from being a flaw, this multiplicity is what keeps symbols creative. It allows art, religion, and communication to evolve rather than freeze. At times, symbols are deliberately twisted. Propaganda exploits familiar images to shape belief. A flag, a slogan, or a song repeated in orchestrated rhythm can override critical thought, turning shared meaning into control. The brain's love of pattern makes it susceptible. Repetition feels like truth. Recognizing this tendency is the first step toward freedom, to see when a symbol serves understanding and when it manipulates it. Misreading can also occur through overexposure. A once sacred gesture, repeated mechanically, may lose its vitality. When meaning becomes habit, awareness fades. Anthropologists call this semantic bleaching, the fading of intensity through repetition. A symbol bleached of meaning becomes decoration. Reviving it requires conscious re-engagement, remembering its story, its purpose, and the humanity it once carried. Yet not all confusion is loss. Misinterpretation can spark creativity. When artists borrow symbols from distant cultures, they often generate new hybrids, bridges between worlds. A misunderstood image can become the seed of new meaning. In this sense, misreading is part of evolution. Symbols wander, adapt, and survive by changing shape. Understanding that flexibility is essential in a global world, every symbol is an agreement renewed each time it is used. Awareness protects against manipulation and opens empathy across difference. When we recognize that signs are not absolute, we become better translators of culture, less certain perhaps, but more compassionate. As you rest, imagine the vast ocean of symbols flowing through history, signs drifting from one shore of meaning to another. Some arrive familiar, others strange, each shaped by wind, time, and interpretation. Their movement mirrors our own journey toward understanding, guided by pattern, prone to error, yet always reaching for connection. Long before alphabets or art, The natural world was humanity's first source of symbols. To early people, every element of their surroundings seemed to speak. The flight of birds, the track of an animal, the rhythm of the seasons. Each pattern carried information vital for survival. Reading nature was reading meaning. Before books, there were footprints in mud. Before mathematics, there were stars arranged across the sky. The world itself functioned as a vast, open library waiting for interpretation. Anthropology suggests that the roots of symbolic thinking lie in this intimacy with the environment. A hunter who could interpret a bent blade of grass as evidence of prey, or a sailor who recognized the position of stars as a compass, relied on pattern recognition as language. Each sign linked physical observation to invisible cause. This connection between symbol and survival became deeply embedded in the human mind. To see meaning in nature was not superstition. It was an early form of science. Astronomy, one of humanity's oldest sciences, began as symbolic reading of the heavens. The constellations, Orion the Hunter, Ursa Major, the Great Bear, the Pleiades cluster, are physical stars scattered across unimaginable distances, yet in human imagination they became coherent figures. Their rising and setting marked the seasons, guiding planting and migration. The pattern itself was arbitrary, but once shared, it carried predictive power. The stars were both calendar and story, science and myth combined. The same symbolic instinct shaped observation on Earth. The phases of the moon were read as signs of fertility and growth. The greening of plants after rain became a metaphor for renewal. Rivers represented both boundary and journey, mountains the meeting point of earth and sky. Anthropologists find these motifs recurring across continents. Although ecosystems differed, the symbolic associations were remarkably consistent, proof that natural experience forged common language long before written words connected distant peoples. Modern science reframes these patterns without erasing their poetry. Understanding that the moon's phases result from orbital geometry does not strip away its symbolic role as a marker of cycles. Knowing that migration follows magnetic fields does not diminish the bird's role as a messenger of change. Knowledge and symbolism coexist, addressing different kinds of truth, one descriptive, one meaningful. Nature teaches both. The practice of biomimicry, designing technology inspired by natural systems, demonstrates how the old habit of learning from nature persists in modern form. Engineers model flight after birds, sonar after bats, architecture after shells and trees. The process is not only practical but symbolic. Each imitation is an act of respect, acknowledging that meaning lies within pattern. By reading nature's design, we rejoin the original conversation between life and understanding. Psychologically, connection to nature continues to ground symbolic thought. Studies in biophilia show that humans instinctively respond to natural imagery, water, trees, light, with calm and focus. Hospitals incorporating natural views report faster healing. Offices with plants reduce stress. These responses are more than aesthetic preference. They are echoes of ancient associations between the natural environment and safety. The symbols of nature still regulate emotion as they once guided survival. Even in cities, traces of this symbolic reading remain. We call financial growth a bull market, storms of emotion, tempests, and social networks, ecosystems. The language of nature continues to structure the metaphors of modern life. When people seek peace, they go to the sea, the forest, or simply a park. These are not random choices but deep symbolic instincts. Returning to the first text humanity learned to read. As you rest, imagine that original library, the wind turning pages of grass, the stars arranged like lines of ancient script, the water reflecting slow paragraphs of cloud. Every sight, sound, and scent carries meaning older than speech. To notice it is to step again into that earliest classroom, the earth itself, where the lesson has never ceased, that life, in all its patterns, speaks a language of symbols for those who listen quietly enough to hear it. When the earliest people looked to the skies, they did not see only stars, they saw stories. Lightning became the weapon of a god, thunder his voice, and the sun his chariot crossing the heavens. These interpretations were not ignorance but imagination, humanity's first attempt to translate mystery into meaning. Before there was science to measure cause, there was myth, the great symbolic mirror through which people explored existence, purpose, and fear. Through myth, the world became intelligible, shaped into a narrative the mind could hold. Across every culture, myth and religion evolved as systems of symbolic understanding. The serpent might represent wisdom or deceit, water renewal or danger, fire creation or destruction. The same elements of nature reappear in sacred stories not by coincidence but because they express shared emotional truths. The human experience of birth, death, and change demanded a language larger than logic. Symbols provided that language, offering bridges between the visible and invisible. Anthropologists and historians of religion have traced these patterns across time. The Egyptian sun god Ra traveled through darkness each night to rise again, a cosmic symbol of rebirth mirrored in the daily cycle of dawn. In Norse myth, the world tree Yggdrasil connected realms of gods and humans, a metaphor for the continuity of life. In Hindu tradition, the endless dance of Shiva represents both destruction and creation, reminding believers that endings feed beginnings. In each case, symbols turn the overwhelming, thunder, death, eternity, into stories that can be remembered, retold, and lived. Psychology gives further insight into why symbols of faith resonate so deeply. Ritual and image engage the emotional brain directly. Neuroscientists studying meditation, chanting, and prayer find synchronized activity between regions responsible for attention, emotion, and self-awareness. Symbolic practice, they suggest, modulates consciousness, producing calm and connection. A believer gazing at a candle flame, a mandala, or a cross is not only performing devotion but also entering a neurological state of integration, the mind's way of aligning thought and feeling around meaning. Religious symbolism also shapes ethics and community. Shared symbols create belonging. A pilgrim's badge, a sacred text, a repeated gesture, each acts as social shorthand for shared belief. Through ritual repetition, as seen earlier, the invisible bond of faith becomes tangible. People who pray together, march together, or sing the same hymns experience measurable emotional synchronization. In this harmony lies religion's power to unify and, at times, to divide. A symbol that comforts one group can exclude another, reminding us that meaning, though sacred, is never static. From a modern scientific perspective, myth still serves a vital cognitive function. It provides frameworks for understanding complexity. The Big Bang, for instance, is not merely a cosmological theory. In popular imagination, it has taken on the symbolic role of creation story. Scientists use metaphor, cosmic birth, dark matter, the fabric of space-time, to translate abstraction into narrative. The difference between myth and science is not the desire to explain but the method of verification. Both rely on symbols to turn the unknown into form. Even secular culture continues to generate modern myths. Superheroes, space sagas, and dystopian tales echo ancient patterns. The hero's journey, the fall from grace, the quest for redemption. They may trade temples for theaters and scrolls for screens, but their psychological roots are unchanged. Through them, societies rehearse moral lessons, express collective anxieties, and imagine hope. Understanding myth and faith symbolically does not diminish their sacredness. It reveals their endurance. The symbol of the rising sun remains powerful whether one calls it Ra or solar fusion. The candle flame still speaks of illumination, whether spiritual or intellectual. Myths are living repositories of human meaning, continually reinterpreted as knowledge expands. They remind us that the desire to understand existence through symbol is not a relic of the past, but a permanent feature of consciousness. As your mind quiets, imagine those first storytellers gathered beneath the constellations, voices weaving explanation into wonder. Their myths were maps, guiding hearts through mystery. Today, science offers new maps, but the impulse is the same: to transform the unknown into something we can name, remember, and cherish. In every age, the symbolic imagination remains our bridge between what we can measure and what we can only feel. Art is humanity's oldest dialogue with meaning. Long before written words, painted walls and carved figures served as communication between inner life and outer world. Every stroke, every curve, every color carried intention. The first cave painters at Lascaux or Chauvet were not merely recording animals. They were expressing relationship between hunter and prey, between life and survival, between the seen and the unseen. Those marks on stone still speak across tens of thousands of years because they are not just pictures, they are symbols, fragments of thought made visible. Archaeology reveals that the birth of art and the rise of symbolic consciousness occurred together. When early humans began decorating bodies, tools, and shelters, they were asserting identity and memory. A red handprint pressed onto rock was not only a signature, it was presence made permanent. Psychologists suggest that creating such images helped stabilize self-awareness, turning fleeting perception into something enduring. In art, consciousness saw itself. As civilizations formed, symbolic art evolved into entire languages. Egyptian hieroglyphs joined imagery and phonetic sound, bridging art and writing. In ancient China, calligraphy became both script and spiritual practice, a visual rhythm reflecting the balance of nature. In medieval cathedrals, stained glass told complex narratives to those who could not read. Each culture shaped its aesthetic around shared meanings: halos for sanctity, lotuses for purity, circles for infinity. These recurring forms connected art to belief and beauty to truth. Neuroscience shows that art's impact reaches deep within the brain. Viewing or creating art activates the default mode network, a system associated with imagination, empathy, and introspection. When people observe harmonious shapes or balanced composition, they experience measurable calm. When they see dynamic contrasts, they feel excitement or tension. These emotional responses are not learned. They arise from the way the brain processes visual pattern. Art communicates through the same symbolic circuitry that governs language, emotion, and memory. Through centuries, art has remained a reflection of humanity's shifting values. The Renaissance emphasized perspective and proportion, symbols of order and human reason. Romanticism embraced turbulence and light, symbols of passion and transcendence. Modern art fragmented form, reflecting the uncertainty of an industrialized age. Even abstraction, though seemingly detached from representation, operates symbolically. A field of blue can signify vastness, isolation, or peace. The canvas becomes not a window but a mirror reflecting states of being. In the modern era, the symbolic vocabulary of art extends into design and media. A corporate logo condenses identity into shape and color. A film frame or photograph can crystallize a historical moment into lasting metaphor. A flag raised, a child's hand outstretched, a silent figure against a wall. These images embed themselves in collective memory precisely because they operate like ancient symbols. Simple, striking, open to interpretation. Art also functions as resistance, using symbols to question or subvert power. Graffiti on city walls, satirical cartoons, and digital collages all reclaim the symbolic field, reminding society that meaning belongs to everyone. When artists repurpose religious icons or political emblems, they reveal the fluidity of symbols, how meaning can be both revered and redefined. Each reinterpretation is a negotiation between past and present. Psychologists studying creativity describe art making as an integration of cognition and emotion. The hand moves, guided by sensory feedback. The eye judges form and balance. Memory and imagination supply content. In this coordination, art mirrors the brain's natural synthesis of logic and feeling. The finished work is thus more than aesthetic. It is the material trace of human consciousness at work. To engage with art is to participate in the same dialogue. Whether you stand before a painting, listen to a symphony, or observe the architecture of a building, you are decoding symbolic intention. You interpret light, color, and rhythm as meaning. Even when you cannot explain why an image moves you, your brain has already understood its message. That silent recognition, the sense that something beyond words has been communicated, is the essence of symbolic art. As you rest, imagine the continuity of creation, hands grinding pigment from earth, eyes tracing lines in fading light, generations layering meaning upon meaning. Art has never ceased to speak. It whispers in color, rhythm, and form, reminding you that the visible world is also a language, one where emotion and thought meet, and where every mark, however small, holds a spark of the human soul. Writing transformed human thought into permanence. What once existed only as spoken sound or remembered image became marks that could travel through time. A word written on clay, papyrus, or paper extended consciousness beyond the moment, allowing minds separated by distance or centuries to communicate. Every letter, stroke, and sign is a symbol of this transformation, the conversion of fleeting voice into visible meaning. Through writing, memory became civilization's architecture. Archaeology traces the earliest writing systems to economic need. Around 5,000 years ago, Sumerian traders pressed shapes into clay tablets to record goods exchanged. Each mark represented quantity or commodity: barley, sheep, oil. Gradually, these pictograms grew abstract. A stylized grain no longer pictured a stalk. It represented the sound of the word. The shift from image to phonetic sign marked a revolution. The cuneiform script of Mesopotamia, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Chinese characters, and Mesoamerican glyphs, each followed different paths, but all served the same purpose: to preserve thought. As alphabets developed, symbols grew simpler yet more powerful. The Phoenicians reduced language to a set of elemental signs, each representing a sound rather than a concept. This compression made writing portable and learnable. The Greeks added vowels, giving letters the capacity to express nuance, rhythm, and logic. From those roots, the Latin alphabet spread across continents, shaping most modern languages. A few dozen shapes became tools capable of recording libraries of human experience. Neuroscience reveals that reading and writing engage multiple systems of the brain: vision, motor control, memory, and speech. When you read, the occipital cortex processes letter shapes, the auditory regions imagine their sounds, and association areas link them to meaning. Writing reverses the flow, translating abstract thought into motion. The loop between seeing and saying, thinking and moving, makes written language one of the most complex symbolic acts the human brain performs. It turns inner speech into external structure. Every script encodes not only language but worldview. Arabic calligraphy's flowing lines evoke divine continuity. Chinese brushwork embodies balance and motion. The block letters of Western typography suggest order and reason. Even digital fonts carry psychological tone, elegance, authority, simplicity, play. Typography, like architecture, organizes thought through form. Each letter is an aesthetic decision, a small design of meaning. In modern times, new technologies have multiplied symbolic writing systems. Binary code reduces expression to zeros and ones. Emojis restore emotion through image. Hashtags organize collective voice. These systems differ in appearance but not in function. They all compress experience into marks that can be stored, shared, and interpreted. A simple icon of a heart or a flame can travel around the world in seconds, reuniting image and feeling much like the first cave drawings once did. Linguists note that writing changes the way humans think. Oral cultures rely on rhythm, repetition, and memory. Literate cultures cultivate analysis, abstraction, and record. The permanence of writing allows reflection and revision, turning language into a tool of inquiry. Philosophy, science, and law all depend on the stability of written symbols. A formula on a chalkboard or an equation in a book is not just a notation, it is the freezing of discovery so that others can read it, question it, and expand it. But writing is not static. It evolves with each generation's imagination. Scripts simplify, merge, or vanish. New languages emerge from global contact. The digital age adds another layer, where voice recognition and machine translation convert speech back into text, blurring the boundaries once again between oral and written. Yet the underlying principle remains constant. Symbols extend mind beyond body. To write, then, is to join an unbroken chain stretching from clay tablets to glowing screens. Every letter carries the weight of that lineage, the collective effort to store meaning in visible form. When you trace words across a page, you reenact humanity's oldest dream, to make thought durable, to let it travel beyond the limits of voice and time. As you rest, imagine the quiet continuity of this act, scribes by lamplight, monks in cold stone halls, poets beneath flickering candles, each adding their marks to the long conversation. The lines and curves you see now are descendants of their work, shapes that hold memory and intention. Writing is not merely a record, it is a reflection of the mind itself, an alphabet of thought that turns silence into story and idea into eternity. Among all symbolic systems humanity has created, mathematics stands apart for its precision and universality. It is a language composed entirely of signs, yet it describes the structure of the cosmos with astonishing accuracy. A few abstract symbols, numbers, lines, and operators have become keys to understanding gravity, sound, growth, and motion. Mathematics is often called the language of nature because the laws it expresses seem woven into the very fabric of existence. Through it, humans learn not just to count what they saw, but to imagine what they could not see. Archaeological evidence shows that early counting began as simple tally marks. A carved bone from Africa, over 20,000 years old, bears groups of notches, an early calendar or inventory. Each mark represented an event, a measure of time, or an object owned. This was the first step in transforming quantity into symbol. Later civilizations refined these markings into systems of numerals. The Babylonians with base 60, the Egyptians with hieroglyphic numbers, and the Mayans with dots and bars. Each was a distinct symbolic code for the same idea, the abstraction of value. The conceptual leap came when numbers were freed from things. Counting once meant sheep or days. Eventually it meant pure quantity, applicable to anything. Mathematics emerged from that freedom. The introduction of zero in India around the 5th century was a turning point. By inventing a symbol for nothing, thinkers gave substance to absence. This single concept made complex calculation, algebra, and eventually computers possible. Zero is both nothing and everything, a void that allows structure. Modern notation, with its familiar numerals and symbols, evolved over centuries through cultural exchange. The so-called Arabic numerals came from India, carried to Europe by trade and scholarship. The equals sign, introduced in the 17th century, compressed a relationship of balance into two parallel lines. Every symbol, from the plus sign to pi, represents an idea larger than itself, shorthand for relationships that govern reality. Together they form an elegant syntax of logic. Physics reveals how deeply mathematics describes the world. The orbits of planets follow numerical patterns predicted long before spacecraft confirmed them. The vibration of a string, the curve of a river, the branching of a tree, each conforms to measurable ratios. Equations do not merely record these patterns, they anticipate them. A mathematician can write a formula that predicts a phenomenon no one has yet observed, and years later, telescopes or microscopes will reveal it to be true. The symbol precedes discovery, as if the universe were written in code waiting to be read. Philosophers still debate whether mathematics is discovered or invented. Is it the human mind uncovering eternal truths, or a set of symbols devised to model perception? Neuroscience offers a middle path. Studies of numerical cognition show specialized regions of the brain dedicated to quantity and proportion. Even infants recognize differences in number, and animals estimate amounts for survival. The human innovation lies in abstraction, turning intuitive sense into symbolic system. Mathematics may arise from biology, but once written, it becomes independent of it, capable of describing realms beyond direct experience. The psychological beauty of mathematics lies in its balance of simplicity and infinity. With a few rules, endless possibilities unfold. Fractals illustrate this vividly. Equations generating forms that repeat in patterns both chaotic and ordered, echoing coastlines and clouds. The elegance of such structures suggests a kinship between mathematics and art. Both reveal hidden harmony beneath appearance. The mathematician, like the artist, seeks pattern, a sign that the world is coherent. In daily life, mathematical symbols are everywhere, though often unnoticed. Clocks divide time, maps convert distance, financial ledgers quantify trust. Binary code, strings of zeros and ones, underlies every digital device, turning electricity into logic. These are the latest descendants of those first tally marks, the continuation of humanity's effort to represent thought through minimal sign. To engage with mathematics is to engage with the most distilled form of symbolism. It compresses the complexity of existence into relationships of number and form. In doing so, it reminds us that meaning can arise from precision as well as poetry. Where words fail, equations speak, silently, universally, without translation. As you rest, imagine the world not as chaos but as quiet order, the spiral of galaxies echoing seashells, the rhythm of breath matching the pulse of stars. Beneath it all runs an invisible grammar, written in numbers and shapes, a silent syntax connecting every movement, every wave, every heartbeat. Mathematics is that language, the most enduring conversation between the human mind and the universe it seeks to understand. In every laboratory, hospital, and public space, a quiet network of symbols protects human life. These are not the poetic emblems of myth or art, but the engineered signs of precision, units, pictograms, and standardized icons that make global cooperation possible. They are designed to be unmistakable, to carry the same meaning in any language, and to prevent error where uncertainty can cost lives. Though they seem purely practical, they reveal another dimension of symbolism, meaning distilled to clarity. Measurement is one of humanity's oldest symbolic agreements. A meter, a kilogram, a second, each is not a physical object but a shared concept. When scientists or engineers say 1 meter, they refer to an abstract standard defined by constants of nature, not by any ruler or rod. This transformation of experience into symbol began thousands of years ago when people used their bodies as tools, the width of a hand, the length of a foot, the span of an arm. Such measures worked locally but failed across distance. Trade and science demanded uniformity, and so began the quest for universal symbols of precision. The history of standardization mirrors the rise of cooperation. The French Revolution brought the metric system, grounding measurements in rationality and equality rather than royal decree. Today, the International System of Units, SI, defines measures through natural phenomena, the speed of light, the vibration of atoms, the charge of electrons. These are the modern temples of certainty, symbolic bridges between human language and the laws of physics. They ensure that a kilogram in Tokyo is the same as one in Nairobi, that a second in orbit matches a second on Earth. Alongside these numeric symbols are visual ones, pictograms that warn, guide, and instruct. The radiation trefoil, the skull and crossbones, the triangle with an exclamation mark, each compresses danger into instant recognition. Designed for immediate understanding, they rely on shape and contrast rather than words. Red signals hazard, yellow demands caution. The brain, wired for survival, responds before reason intervenes. In emergencies, that reflex saves lives. Psychology explains why such symbols must be simple. Under stress, the brain's cognitive resources narrow. Comprehension must occur in milliseconds. High contrast colors and clear geometry trigger instinctive attention, activating regions involved in threat detection. Repetition further reinforces this reflex. The more often a warning symbol is seen, the faster it bypasses conscious thought. This is not manipulation but adaptation, an evolved conversation between perception and safety. Science, too, speaks through symbols. The periodic table, a grid of letters and numbers, encapsulates the structure of matter. Circuit diagrams translate invisible electric currents into lines and nodes. Chemical equations compress reactions that occur in billionths of a second into readable form. For specialists, these symbols are as expressive as poetry, capturing relationships too complex for ordinary language. Each formula or icon is a promise that knowledge can be shared precisely, that meaning can be universal. Even everyday life depends on this symbolic infrastructure. Road signs guide travelers across continents. Medicine labels instruct without translation. Airplane cabins are lined with icons that explain evacuation, light, and sound. Every mark represents years of testing and agreement, the product of committees, experiments, and human care. Beneath their quiet presence lies an immense collaborative effort to ensure that information transcends borders. Yet, like all symbols, those of precision can evolve or fail. A poorly designed pictogram may confuse, a measurement system may change as science refines its constants. When the definition of the kilogram shifted in 2019 from a metal artifact to a quantum formula, no one's weight altered, but the world's foundation of measurement grew more stable. It was a symbolic victory for universality over material fragility. In these systems of precision and safety, meaning becomes responsibility. Every symbol carries the weight of trust. Trust that a dosage label is accurate, that a bridge calculation is correct, that a sign truly warns of danger. They remind us that symbolism is not only spiritual or emotional, it is practical, ethical, and continuous. The same human need to communicate truth across difference that gave rise to art and myth also built these quiet guardians of daily life. As you rest, imagine those small marks surrounding you, numbers glowing on instruments, lines printed on packaging, icons etched on doors. Each one speaks a silent promise that knowledge can protect, that understanding can save. They are the calm language of order amid complexity, the careful symbols that make modern existence possible, ensuring that life continues safely within the immense, shared design of meaning. Sound and movement are the most transient of all experiences. A melody exists only while it is played. A dance vanishes the moment the body stops moving. Yet humans have always sought ways to preserve these fleeting forms, to hold rhythm and gesture long after they fade from the air. Out of this desire arose two extraordinary symbolic systems, musical notation and dance notation. Through them, people found a way to turn motion into memory and vibration into language. The earliest evidence of musical notation dates back nearly 4,000 years. Clay tablets from Mesopotamia record hymns with symbols indicating pitch and timing. Ancient Greece developed alphabetic markings above lyrics to guide singers. In medieval monasteries, monks drew neumes, dots, and lines floating above text that gradually evolved into the staff notation still used today. Each note represents not a sound itself but a relationship, how high, how long, how soft. These marks, refined over centuries, became a universal code capable of recreating entire symphonies centuries after their composers were gone. The science of sound underlies this symbolic precision. Sound waves are vibrations traveling through air. Their frequency determines pitch, their amplitude volume. Music notation converts these physical properties into visual signs. The brain's auditory and visual regions cooperate to translate ink into imagined sound. Musicians reading a score often hear the music silently, a phenomenon called audiation, where symbols trigger neural simulations of tone and rhythm. It is one of the purest examples of how abstract symbols can evoke sensory experience directly. Dance presented a similar challenge: how to record motion in time and space. For most of history, choreography was transmitted through demonstration, an unbroken chain of teacher to student. In the 20th century, systems like Laban notation and Benish notation emerged, using abstract lines, curves, and grids to represent direction, level, and dynamics of movement. Each mark corresponds to position or quality, a leap, a turn, a pause. What was once ephemeral became legible. Through these symbols, performances could be archived and revived decades later with remarkable fidelity. Psychology and neuroscience illuminate why such symbolic preservation matters. The human brain's mirror neuron system fires both when performing an action and when observing it. This mechanism makes movement communicable. Watching a dancer activates motor circuits in the observer. Notation extends this empathy across time. When reading dance symbols, choreographers envision bodies in motion just as musicians hear sound in notes. Symbols thus serve as bridges between minds separated by years or continents. Culturally, the ability to capture sound and motion changed everything. It allowed music and dance to move from local ritual to global art. A score written in Vienna could be performed in Seoul. Choreography from one culture could inspire another. This portability of expression transformed symbols into vessels of emotion that could travel farther than any traveler. It also democratized creativity. Anyone who could read the code could recreate the experience, carrying the artist's voice into the future. Technology has deepened this symbolism. The invention of recording devices, phonographs, film, and digital media automated what notation first attempted: to hold motion and sound beyond their moment. Yet even in an age of perfect replication, notation remains vital. A recording preserves one performance, a score preserves potential. It allows reinterpretation, improvisation, and evolution. Symbols invite participation. They do not end the conversation, they keep it alive. Music and dance are also symbolic languages in themselves. A national anthem becomes identity, A wedding song symbolizes union, a funeral march expresses farewell. Movements, too, carry meaning. The raised arms of ballet's fifth position suggest openness. The rhythm of a folk dance encodes heritage. These associations arise not from the marks on paper but from collective emotion. The body and the ear remember what the mind might forget. As you rest, imagine the invisible patterns of sound and movement around you, vibrations in the air, small shifts of breath, the pulse beneath your skin. These are your own notations, written in rhythm and motion. They connect you to every musician and dancer who ever tried to capture the fleeting and make it last. Through symbols, we have learned to preserve what is momentary, to let the echo of each heartbeat, each step, continue long after silence and stillness return. Across the centuries, humanity has searched for ways to define its place, not only in space, but in belonging. To draw a map or raise a flag is to declare orientation. This is where we are. This is who we are. These are symbols of both geography and identity, turning invisible concepts like territory, origin, and unity into visible form. Yet beneath their apparent simplicity lies a profound interplay between knowledge and emotion, science and symbolism. The earliest maps were not accurate depictions of distance or scale. They were expressions of relationship. On clay tablets from Mesopotamia, rivers and cities appear as lines and circles, not to guide travel but to show meaning, where power lay, where gods resided, how the world was ordered. For ancient peoples, mapping was a sacred act. To represent the earth was to participate in its creation. The land itself was not just drawn, it was interpreted. As navigation improved, maps became instruments of exploration. The compass and sextant transformed guesswork into geometry, allowing sailors to chart new routes. Each map carried both precision and imagination. Oceans filled with sea monsters, unknown lands shaded in gold. They symbolized discovery but also dominion. To draw a border was to claim, to name was to own. Cartography thus became not only a science of measurement but a language of power. Even today, the shapes of countries on schoolroom walls remind us that maps are never neutral. They reflect human choices about what to include, what to center, and what to leave unseen. Psychology explains why orientation feels essential. The human hippocampus, a brain region tied to memory, also constructs mental maps of space. This neural mapping links geography to identity. Knowing where you are helps define who you are. The same mechanism that helps a bird navigate migration helps a person find home. When physical landmarks are lost after disaster or displacement, people often feel disoriented, not just spatially but emotionally. Maps restore coherence. They make the world knowable again. Flags emerged later as symbols of collective identity rather than location. A piece of colored fabric, raised high, became a shorthand for belonging. In battle, it rallied soldiers. In peace, it marked unity. The earliest flags, woven with dynastic emblems or sacred animals, served as moving stories of lineage and belief. Over time, designs simplified into geometric forms and color codes that could be recognized instantly. Red for courage, white for peace, blue for loyalty, a visual grammar shared across nations, yet endlessly reinterpreted. Heraldry, the medieval art of coats of arms, refined this language into meticulous symbolism. Every color, line, and figure had meaning. A lion for bravery, a cross for faith, a diagonal stripe for protection. Heraldry was both record and aspiration, declaring values through design. Modern logos and national flags continue this lineage. The simplicity of a circle, a star, or a stripe can hold centuries of memory and hope. These emblems function as emotional anchors, condensing history into color and shape. Sociologists note that symbols of identity often work through ritual. A flag is not meaningful until raised. A map gains life when read or traced. These actions activate belonging. People salute, sing, or stand still, transforming cloth and paper into communal experience. The gesture itself becomes symbolic, an embodied reaffirmation of unity. At the same time, such symbols can divide. A border drawn to define one nation can exclude another. A flag that inspires pride in some may evoke pain in others. Identity, like territory, is always negotiated. Digital technology has created new kinds of maps and flags. Online location can shift with a click, and identity may exist across multiple nations and cultures. Digital maps show not only geography but behavior, traffic flows, migration patterns, even social connections. Emojis of flags travel faster than any wind, redefining how communities see themselves. Still, the instinct remains ancient: to visualize belonging, to chart meaning, to orient self within a shared world. When you unfold a map or watch a flag flutter, you are witnessing one of humanity's oldest symbolic impulses: the desire to make place and purpose visible. Maps transform chaos into pattern. Flags transform multitude into unity. They are mirrors of perception, how we choose to see ourselves in relation to Earth and to one another. As you rest, imagine the globe slowly turning beneath a night sky, borders invisible, oceans seamless. The lines and colors we draw upon it are temporary, yet the need behind them, to belong, to understand, to locate meaning, is timeless. Every map, every flag is a reminder of that ancient quest, to find direction in the vastness and to turn identity into symbol. To hide meaning is as human as to express it. Alongside open language runs a parallel tradition, the craft of concealment. From whispered messages and carved runes to digital encryption, humans have always sought to control who may read their symbols. A code is a paradox. It hides by revealing, conceals by writing. Behind each symbol lies the tension between curiosity and protection, between knowledge shared and knowledge withheld. The story of coded language begins in antiquity. The Spartans wrapped messages around a staff, a cytale, so that the letters aligned only when the strip of parchment was wound in the correct direction. Julius Caesar shifted the alphabet by 3 letters, inventing a cipher simple yet effective in its time. Throughout history, generals, lovers, and scholars devised patterns of substitution, invisible inks, and hidden compartments. Each method relied on the same principle: meaning transformed into form that only the initiated could reverse. At its core, cryptography is the mathematics of secrecy. In the modern world, its language has become algebraic. Letters have turned into numbers. Ink has become data. When your phone locks, when a password protects your bank account, when spacecraft send signals across millions of kilometers, encryption safeguards those exchanges. Algorithms built from primes and modular arithmetic scramble information so thoroughly that without the correct key, decoding becomes computationally impossible. What was once a spy's art has become a pillar of civilization. The symbolism of codes extends beyond function. Psychologically, the act of hiding reflects 2 deep human desires: privacy and trust. To encrypt a message is to declare that some knowledge is precious, that it belongs to a specific circle of understanding. This impulse shaped early secret societies and mystical traditions. The alchemists, for instance, cloaked their experiments in symbols: serpents eating their tails, suns and moons in embrace, flasks surrounded by riddles. Their secrecy protected both discovery and identity. To outsiders, these drawings were nonsense. To initiates, they held layers of meaning: chemical, spiritual, and moral. Even language itself carries traces of code. Slang, metaphor, and double meaning create subtle in-groups of comprehension. A poet's imagery or a scientist's formula can act like passwords to particular worlds of thought. Understanding becomes initiation, translation, revelation. In this way, secrecy drives progress. Hidden knowledge invites pursuit. The history of science is filled with discoveries born from decoding, the Rosetta Stone unlocking hieroglyphs, the decipherment of linear B, the cracking of DNA's double helix from cryptic X-ray patterns. Each triumph reveals how breaking a code can expand what humanity knows. During wartime, cryptography became survival. The Enigma machine, used by Nazi Germany during the Second World War, produced ciphers so intricate that decoding them seemed impossible. Yet, mathematicians like Alan Turing and his team at Bletchley Park built machines that unraveled the pattern, changing the course of history. Their success showed that every code, however complex, carries within it a trace of order waiting to be found. The same logic drives cybersecurity today, an endless contest between concealment and detection, creation and cracking. Philosophically, codes raise questions about truth itself. Is meaning ever truly open, or is all understanding a kind of decoding? Semiotics suggests that every word is already a cipher, a visible sign concealing an invisible idea. When you read the word tree, you perform decryption, translating lines of ink into mental image. The entire world, seen through this lens, becomes a layered code, each pattern a message from nature or culture awaiting interpretation. Yet secrecy has a moral dimension. It protects privacy but can also hide wrongdoing. In the digital era, encryption guards freedom of speech while shielding illicit acts. The same mathematics that secures hospitals and spacecraft also encrypts dark markets. This duality reflects the essence of symbols. Their power depends on intent. A code itself is neutral. The meaning lies in how it is used. Art and literature have long celebrated this tension. From riddles in sacred texts to the hidden signatures of Renaissance painters, mystery invites engagement. Readers, like detectives, derive pleasure from uncovering what lies beneath. Every revelation is a miniature awakening, a rehearsal for greater understanding. In this way, secrecy does not oppose knowledge, it propels it. As you rest, consider the unseen codes surrounding you, the genetic alphabet within your cells, the digital keys that guard your messages, the subtle signals exchanged in every glance and tone. Life itself is encrypted, information wrapped in layers of protection, waiting to be read. And just as the universe hides its laws in patterns of light and number, your own mind carries its private language of memories and dreams. To live is to interpret, to decrypt the world one symbol at a time. Each time you open an app, press a button, or swipe across a screen, you participate in one of the newest forms of symbolism, the digital interface. These tiny icons and gestures translate the immense complexity of modern computation into something instantly comprehensible. They are the mediators between silicon logic and human intention, a symbolic bridge joining thought and machine. Like the first alphabets, they turn abstraction into experience, giving invisible processes a visible language. Every click or tap is a conversation between two symbolic systems, binary code and human perception. Deep within a device, reality is measured in bits, ones and zeros representing electric states. Billions of these micro-decisions occur each second, forming the structure of digital life. Yet to the human eye, all that complexity resolves into a simple image. A paperclip for attachments, a trash bin for deletion, a cloud for storage. These metaphors are the latest descendants of prehistoric drawings, symbols that make the unseen tangible. The evolution of digital design mirrors earlier stages of human communication. When computers first appeared, They required typed commands written in programming languages, strings of symbols that only specialists could decipher. As machines became personal, designers introduced graphical user interfaces. Windows, icons, menus, and cursors replaced coded instruction with visual metaphor. The desktop simulated a workspace, the folder replaced the filing cabinet, and the trash bin offered reassurance that deletion could be undone. These metaphors humanized technology, turning the abstract flow of data into a landscape the brain already understood. Cognitive psychology explains why these symbols work so effectively. The human mind relies on affordances, visual cues that suggest how an object should be used. A button that looks raised invites pressing. An arrow suggests direction. Designers exploit these perceptual expectations, aligning visual form with intended action. In doing so, they create intuitive meaning that transcends language barriers. Whether in Tokyo or Nairobi, a magnifying glass still means search. The digital world, though built from code, thus becomes a universal visual grammar. Technology also generates its own mythology through symbols: the glowing apple, the blue bird, the broken robot. Each logo becomes a modern totem, condensing stories of innovation, community, or rebellion. In an era of endless information, logos serve as emotional shortcuts, allowing users to navigate identity within vast digital landscapes. Marketing and psychology intertwine here. A symbol is no longer just a tool, it is a statement of belonging. Clicking an icon can express affiliation as surely as waving a flag. Yet the symbolic interface also hides as much as it reveals. Behind the friendly colors of an app lie millions of lines of code and complex data systems invisible to most users. This abstraction is both convenience and concealment. The simplicity that enables accessibility also distances us from understanding how machines truly work. The result is a new kind of faith, trust in the symbol to perform its promise. When you tap a blue triangle to send a message, you believe that meaning will travel safely through invisible circuits, just as ancient people trusted the mark on parchment to carry words across time. Ethically, this reliance raises profound questions. Symbols designed for clarity can also manipulate. A red notification bubble sparks urgency, exploiting the brain's sensitivity to color and reward. Algorithms use icons and sounds to shape behavior, subtle cues that keep attention engaged. Semiotics meets psychology in the attention economy, where meaning becomes persuasion. Understanding these mechanisms restores agency, reminding users that every symbol carries intent. Still, the beauty of the digital symbol lies in its adaptability. Emojis, GIFs, and reactions form an ever-expanding emotional alphabet, allowing people to convey tone and feeling in a medium once considered cold. A single pixelated tear or burst of confetti can express what entire sentences cannot. In this sense, technology completes a circle, returning image and expression to written communication, merging art and language once more. Scientists and designers now explore interfaces beyond sight, symbols that respond to voice, gesture, or touch. Virtual and augmented reality turn information into spatial experience, embedding symbols into the environment itself. As artificial intelligence advances, it too becomes part of the symbolic web, generating images, music, and text that mirror human imagination. Machines have learned to speak our language of metaphor, perhaps the ultimate testament to symbolism's power. As you rest, picture the quiet glow of your own devices fading into darkness. Behind every light, every click, every icon lies a cascade of meaning, a digital echo of humanity's oldest urge to represent, simplify, and connect. Technology has not replaced symbols, it has expanded them. The screens that surround you are new canvases for an ancient language, where each small sign still says the same thing it always has. This stands for something more. Symbols do not merely reflect meaning, they shape it. Throughout history, leaders, movements, and institutions have used symbols to influence perception, stir emotion, and command loyalty. A crown, a flag, a logo, a uniform, each condenses ideology into form. These are not neutral emblems, they are instruments of persuasion. The psychology of symbols in power reveals how human beings can be united, inspired, or manipulated by shape and color alone. In ancient civilizations, rulers understood this instinctively. Pharaohs wore headdresses that represented divine connection. Roman legions marched under eagles, symbolizing empire. These designs communicated authority more effectively than decrees. To see the emblem was to feel order and strength. Political semiotics calls this visual legitimacy, the ability of imagery to make abstract power visible. When a symbol becomes synonymous with leadership, it replaces argument with recognition. Religion refined this strategy further. Crosses, crescents, and mandalas carried entire cosmologies in simple geometry. Their repetition in architecture and ritual reinforced belief through familiarity. Cognitive science explains that the brain responds to repeated visual cues with emotional reinforcement. What is seen often becomes what feels true. Repetition, rhythm, and color synchronize perception and emotion, creating trust that can outlast reason. Modern advertising relies on the same mechanism. In the 20th century, propaganda transformed symbolic persuasion into a science. Governments learned to mobilize populations with carefully designed imagery, bold colors, heroic postures, and memorable slogans. The swastika, for example, was chosen not for meaning alone but for visual impact, symmetry, simplicity, movement. It demonstrates how symbols can be weaponized, stripped of prior associations and redefined by force. Once infused with collective emotion, a symbol becomes nearly indestructible. Even when discredited, it lingers in memory as warning. Corporations inherited and commercialized these techniques. Logos function as the modern coat of arms. The bitten apple, the golden arches, the swoosh, they are emblems of identity, aspiration, and belonging. Each distills narrative into a sign instantly recognizable across cultures. Neuromarketing studies show that familiar brand symbols activate the same brain regions as faces of friends, eliciting comfort and trust. Through consistent repetition, the visual mark becomes more persuasive than any product description. Color psychology reinforces this effect. Red excites, blue reassures, green soothes, black conveys authority. Designers use these responses to guide attention and emotion, shaping not only what people buy but how they feel. Typography, too, communicates mood. Serif fonts for tradition, sans serif for modernity, script for elegance. Together, these elements form a silent rhetoric, an argument expressed through aesthetic harmony. Architecture participates in symbolic persuasion on a monumental scale. The domes of capitals, the columns of banks, the glass towers of corporate headquarters, all project stability and control. The materials themselves carry meaning: stone for permanence, steel for progress, transparency for trust. Political leaders stage speeches against such backdrops to borrow their symbolic gravity. The setting becomes part of the message. In digital media, the dynamics of persuasion have accelerated. Icons, hashtags, and memes can rally millions in hours. Their power lies in emotional compression. A single image can trigger outrage or solidarity faster than words. Algorithms amplify symbols that provoke reaction, creating self-reinforcing cycles of attention. In this environment, symbolic literacy becomes essential. Recognizing how visual design influences emotion allows individuals to navigate information critically rather than passively. Psychologically, Humans are drawn to symbols of power because they reduce complexity. They provide orientation in uncertainty, offering clear signs of belonging or opposition. This simplicity comforts, but it also divides. The same emblem that unites can exclude. The same color that inspires pride can trigger fear in others. Understanding this duality is key to preserving freedom of thought within a world saturated by persuasive imagery. Semioticians describe power symbols as performative. They do not merely represent authority, they enact it. A uniform grants command. A seal authenticates law. A signature transforms promise into obligation. Each act depends on collective belief in the symbol's validity. The moment that trust breaks, the emblem collapses into decoration. Power, therefore, is as fragile as the meaning sustaining it. To study symbols of persuasion is to study influence itself, how images guide emotion, how repetition shapes memory, and how belief turns form into force. Awareness is the first defense. To see symbols clearly, not as invisible instructions but as deliberate constructions, restores agency. They can inspire greatness or conceal control, depending on how they are read. When stripped of illusion, they remind us of a deeper truth. Power is not contained in the symbol, but in the people who choose to believe in it. Not all symbols are designed to command or persuade. Some exist to comfort, to orient, and to include. They communicate safety, accessibility, and empathy in spaces where words might fail. The simplest icons on a door, a street, or a screen, a wheelchair sign, a heartbeat, a helping hand, carry messages of trust and belonging. They tell people, "You are seen, you are welcome, you are safe here." These are the symbols of care, created through collaboration between design, psychology, and ethics. Their purpose is not to inspire awe, but to reduce anxiety. Hospitals, airports, and public buildings rely on standardized pictograms precisely because clarity saves time and prevents confusion. The International Organization for Standardization, ISO, oversees many of these signs, ensuring they can be understood across cultures and languages. A white cross on green means medical aid, from Buenos Aires to Bangkok. A figure in motion toward a door means exit everywhere. Such visual language transcends nationality, embodying the principle of universality through compassion. The design of inclusive symbols reflects careful research into human perception. Shapes are simplified until recognition becomes immediate. Color contrasts are chosen for visibility, not aesthetics. Proportions are calibrated to remain legible from a distance or by people with impaired vision. This precision, though technical, carries moral weight. It transforms empathy into form. The accessibility ramp symbol, for instance, does more than mark a route. It represents the right to participate fully in society. It reminds architects, planners, and policymakers that design itself communicates values. Psychology explains why these symbols are powerful. The human brain processes images faster than text, particularly in moments of stress. In emergencies, people rely on intuitive cues, arrows, lights, or familiar shapes. These guide behavior through instinct rather than reasoning. The success of such systems depends on trust, the quiet confidence that when one follows the symbol, safety awaits. That trust is built through consistency. The more universal the image, the deeper the reassurance. Inclusive design goes beyond physical safety. It seeks to represent diversity and dignity. Modern iconography now depicts a wider range of bodies, genders, and abilities, reflecting changing social awareness. The evolution of the wheelchair accessibility symbol illustrates this shift. Originally static, it showed a seated figure in passive posture. Newer versions depict motion, suggesting independence and agency. This subtle change transforms perception. The individual is not being accommodated but empowered. Symbols evolve as empathy expands. Digital environments have inherited this ethical responsibility. Interface designers use icons to make technology intuitive for all users, regardless of literacy or ability. Features like closed caption symbols, contrast adjustments, and screen reader indicators signal inclusion in the virtual world. Each small icon stands for years of advocacy, proof that compassion can be encoded in pixels as well as in policy. Culturally, symbols of care remind societies of their shared humanity. The Red Cross, Red Crescent, and Red Crystal are recognized globally as signs of neutrality and aid, protected even in war. Their simplicity is deliberate, color and geometry stripped to essence, visible through smoke, dust, or darkness. They demonstrate how design can embody ethics, how meaning can save lives. Similarly, humanitarian logos and awareness ribbons transform empathy into visual identity. The pink ribbon, the rainbow flag, the white dove, each began as a small emblem and grew into a global language of solidarity. Architecture, too, participates in this symbolic ethic. The placement of signs, the openness of entrances, the visibility of assistance stations, all influence how welcome a person feels. Inclusive design turns accessibility into a universal aesthetic, proving that practicality and beauty are not opposites. A ramp curving gracefully into a doorway can symbolize equality as eloquently as any speech. The philosophy behind these symbols rests on a simple truth. Understanding is a form of care. When systems communicate clearly, they respect human vulnerability. Confusion isolates, clarity includes. To design for recognition is to design for dignity. Symbols of care and inclusion stand quietly in contrast to those of dominance and power. They do not demand attention, they offer guidance. They are the gentle vocabulary of civilization, marks that replace fear with comprehension and distance with trust. In their simplicity lies a profound form of compassion, the belief that meaning, when shared clearly, can make the world more human. Law, at its core, is an abstract idea, a belief in fairness, accountability, and shared order. Yet societies have always clothed this abstraction in visible form. From robes and seals to scales and gavels, justice speaks through symbols. These emblems turn principle into presence, making authority tangible and trust possible. They remind people that law is not simply written in books, but enacted through ritual, gesture, and form. The image of the scales of justice is among the oldest. Found on Egyptian reliefs depicting the goddess Ma'at, it symbolized the weighing of truth against deceit. In Greek art, the goddess Dike held the same instrument, and in Rome, Justitia, blindfolded and serene, balanced the scales with one hand and raised a sword with the other. These symbols endured for millennia because they expressed moral tension in perfect visual simplicity, balance, impartiality, and consequence. The scales weigh, the sword enforces. Together they communicate fairness through equilibrium and strength. The robe of the judge serves a similar function. Its dark color removes individuality, signaling that the wearer speaks not as a person but as an office. The uniform transforms subjective opinion into objective role, suggesting continuity beyond any single lifetime. This ritual of attire exists in nearly every culture, from the black robes of Western courts to the ceremonial garb of traditional elders and scholars. By concealing the personal, the robe emphasizes the institutional. Authority, in this context, is not personal charisma but the embodiment of an idea. The gavel, often carved from wood, carries its own symbolic lineage. Its sound marks beginnings and endings, silence and attention. One strike can command order or finalize judgment. It operates as a sonic emblem of law's authority, the transformation of speech into decision. The act is simple, but the meaning profound. The vibration of wood against desk becomes the heartbeat of deliberation. In the echo, citizens hear the law's promise that chaos will yield to procedure. Seals and signatures extend this symbolism into documentation. A seal authenticates, it certifies truth through impression. Long before literacy was widespread, rulers and officials used engraved rings or stamps to validate decrees. The wax bore the mark of legitimacy, its breaking proof of tampering. Modern legal systems continue this tradition digitally through encryption, not wax, but the logic is unchanged. Whether pressed by hand or verified by algorithm, a seal converts intention into formal commitment. It is the moment when authority meets trust. Architecture magnifies these symbols on the civic stage. Courthouses rise on steps and colonnades that evoke classical temples, their facades designed to inspire respect rather than fear. The geometry, symmetry, balance, elevation mirrors the principles the law claims to uphold. Within, high ceilings and central chambers create acoustics that amplify each word, emphasizing that speech here carries consequence. These designs are not decorative, they are pedagogical, teaching visitors through space that justice is deliberate, not impulsive. Ritual completes the symbolic structure, standing when a judge enters, taking an oath before testimony, presenting evidence with formality. Each action reaffirms that justice depends on collective respect for order. Anthropologists describe courts as theaters of morality, where participants perform belief in fairness so that fairness becomes real. Without these rituals, law risks losing its sacred neutrality and collapsing into mere power. Yet legal symbols, like all symbols, can drift from meaning. When robes obscure compassion, or when seals protect corruption, the imagery of justice turns hollow. Throughout history, revolutions have targeted these very emblems, smashing seals, burning documents, tearing robes, as acts of liberation. Such gestures reveal that symbols of law hold moral weight only so long as they serve integrity. Once belief fades, ritual becomes costume, and justice becomes spectacle. Modern societies continue to evolve new legal symbols to reflect broader inclusion. The traditional blindfold, once representing impartiality, has been reconsidered. Does blindness ensure fairness or conceal bias? Some contemporary depictions remove it, preferring vigilance over indifference. In many countries, court designs now include transparent materials, open galleries, and accessible layouts. Architectural metaphors for accountability. The visual language of justice, like justice itself, must adapt to remain credible. Behind all this symbolism lies a shared psychological need. People require visible assurance that moral order exists, that fairness is not an abstraction but a living practice. Symbols provide that assurance. They make values visible, allowing citizens to recognize the moment when principle becomes action. The robe, the seal, the gavel, these are reminders that law is more than punishment or control. It is a covenant between society and conscience, performed in daily rituals of fairness. The symbols of justice endure because they express a timeless aspiration that truth can be weighed, that words can carry power, and that authority, when bound to meaning, can serve something greater than itself. Few symbols hold as much collective belief as money. A simple piece of paper, a minted coin, or a line of digits on a screen has no inherent value, yet it can command labor, resources, and trust across the globe. This is one of humanity's most successful symbolic inventions, an agreement so powerful that it shapes economies, ambitions, and even identities. In money, meaning becomes measurable, and trust becomes transferable. Anthropologists trace the origins of money to systems of barter and debt. Early societies traded goods directly, grain for cloth, tools for animals. Over time, These exchanges required tokens to represent value more abstractly: shells, beads, and metal pieces that stood for promise rather than possession. The moment value detached from substance, money became a symbol. Gold coins worked not because of the metal alone, but because everyone believed in its worth. Value was no longer mined from earth, it was minted in agreement. Sociologists describe money as a collective fiction, a shared belief that coordinates behavior. When you accept a banknote, you are trusting millions of strangers you will never meet, confident they will honor the same story of value. This trust is reinforced through ritual and symbol. Engraved portraits, official seals, and serial numbers that signal authenticity. The intricate design of currencies serves both security and psychology, blending art with authority to sustain belief. Economics, in its modern form, extends this symbolic logic. A stock certificate, a bond, a digital asset, each represents ownership or potential, not a physical object. The digits flickering on screens are agreements encoded in algorithms, the 21st century descendants of ancient coins. Even cryptocurrencies, often touted as alternatives to traditional systems, rely on collective trust, faith in code rather than government, in encryption rather than empire. The blockchain ledger is a digital temple of belief, proving that confidence, not materiality, underwrites every economy. Brands operate through a similar structure of meaning. A logo, a slogan, or even a color can transform an ordinary product into a vessel of identity. The Nike swoosh, the bitten apple, the golden arches, each triggers a cascade of associations: aspiration, innovation, familiarity. Marketing transforms consumption into ritual. Buying becomes participation in a symbolic world. Psychologists call this emotional branding, the fusion of personal values with corporate narrative. When someone wears a logo, they are not merely advertising a company, they are declaring an affiliation, a small expression of self. Neuromarketing studies reveal that brands activate the brain's emotional centers, not its analytical ones. Recognition elicits comfort, repetition builds attachment. Over time, symbols of commerce achieve the same neurological weight as religious icons once did, signifying belonging, hope, or redemption, though measured in lifestyle rather than faith. The marketplace, in this sense, is not just economic but mythological, populated by narratives of success, transformation, and desire. Currency and brand imagery overlap more than they differ. Both rely on trust, repetition, and design to maintain influence. The intricate filigree on a banknote mirrors the elegance of a luxury logo. Both evoke stability and prestige. Their visual language borrows from history. Laurel wreaths for triumph, eagles for power, crowns for excellence. These motifs connect modern capitalism to ancient symbolism of authority. A coin once bore a king's profile. Today, a credit card carries a corporate emblem. The faces may change, but the message endures, power expressed through image. Yet symbols of wealth also conceal paradox. They promise freedom while creating dependence. A symbol meant to simplify exchange can become a source of inequality and anxiety. When societies measure worth entirely through monetary sign, human value risks becoming numerical. Philosophers from Aristotle to Marx have warned that money's abstraction can obscure real relationships, that in translating everything into symbol, we may forget what the symbol once represented: cooperation, need, and trust. Cultural shifts sometimes reveal this fragility. During economic crises, faith in money falters. During revolutions, currency designs are torn and replaced, as if to rewrite the collective story of value. Even hyperinflated banknotes, once commanding billions, now worthless scraps, remain potent as artifacts. They show how swiftly meaning can evaporate when belief breaks. Symbols of wealth are powerful, but their foundation is psychological, not physical. In art and literature, creators have long explored this duality. Painters depict coins and jewels as vanitas, reminders of impermanence. Writers describe fortunes rising and falling like tides of collective imagination. Money and brands, they suggest, are mirrors of human desire. They reflect not what is real, but what is hoped for. Their symbols endure because hope itself is currency. In the end, the market is a symbolic theatre, where confidence and image determine movement as much as supply and demand. Logos, coins, digital icons, all function as shorthand for trust. Understanding them clearly reveals an unsettling truth. Economies run not only on production but on belief, and belief, once shaped into symbol, becomes the most valuable commodity of all. Politics, though built on law and policy, thrives on performance. Its strength lies not only in governance but in the ability to project meaning through ceremony and image. From ancient coronations to televised inaugurations, from marble statues to digital campaigns, power is expressed symbolically. Each gesture, colour, and emblem transforms authority into spectacle, turning governance into a visible drama that citizens can witness and interpret. In early civilizations, rulers fused religion and state through ritual. The pharaoh's crown, the emperor's throne, or the pope's tiara embodied the idea that leadership was divinely sanctioned. Crowds gathered not merely to see the ruler, but to affirm the cosmic order that the ruler represented. The visual language of power, elevated platforms, radiant colors, and geometric symmetry made hierarchy seem natural. Anthropology describes these displays as rituals of legitimation, where authority renews itself through repeated symbolic acts. Modern democracies, though secular, retain these forms. Parliaments open with ceremonies, national holidays feature parades, and leaders take oaths before flags or constitutions. The symbolism is intentional. Transparency replaces divinity, but ritual endures. Standing before a flag signals unity. Placing a hand on a document symbolizes fidelity to shared law. Citizens watching these acts experience what sociologists call civil religion, the shared belief that political institutions deserve reverence because they sustain order. Power, made visible, becomes trustable. Architecture amplifies this effect. Government buildings are designed to inspire respect and stability. The domes of capitals, the steps of courthouses, the vast plazas before monuments, all evoke continuity and scale. Their proportions echo ancient temples, suggesting that governance, like worship, is a sacred responsibility. Inside, flags, crests, and seals repeat the state's identity, ensuring that every decision occurs within a frame of symbolism. Even the spatial hierarchy, podiums above audiences, chambers arranged in circles or tiers, reinforces authority and visibility. Political symbols extend far beyond institutions. They live in gestures, colors, and slogans. A clenched fist, a raised hand, a bowed head, each carries history and emotion. Movements choose these signs carefully because they compress ideology into motion. A single act, repeated, can ignite solidarity. The wave of a protest flag or the silence of a vigil communicates more than words could express. Political semiotics studies this compression of meaning, showing how imagery transforms individuals into collective identity. Color plays a central role in this symbolic theater. Red has long signified revolution or courage. Blue suggests order and calm. Green evokes renewal or faith. Black conveys resistance or mourning. These associations are consistent across many cultures and are used strategically in campaigns, uniforms, and propaganda. A simple background on a podium can frame an entire narrative: optimism, seriousness, unity, defiance. The human eye, attuned to contrast and pattern, reads emotional tone even before language enters. Rituals of state power also serve psychological functions. They relieve anxiety in uncertain times by projecting continuity. When a new leader swears an oath, the repetition of words and gestures signals stability. The system endures despite change. This symbolic reassurance is crucial for collective trust. Anthropologists note that the predictability of ceremony provides emotional order where political conflict might otherwise generate fear. The ritual becomes a shared anchor in the flux of history. Yet the stage of power can also conceal. When spectacle outweighs substance, symbols risk becoming manipulation. Dictatorships, in particular, rely heavily on orchestrated imagery. Mass rallies, choreographed salutes, monumental statues. These displays transform obedience into participation, convincing citizens that their submission is unity. The architecture of totalitarianism is both literal and psychological: vast spaces designed to make the individual feel small beneath the emblem of the state. The same tools that inspire pride can enforce conformity. In the digital era, the theater of power has expanded into the virtual realm. Campaign logos, viral hashtags, and live-streamed speeches have replaced parades as expressions of belonging. The smartphone screen has become the new public square. Political symbolism now circulates globally at unprecedented speed, shaped not by marble and metal but by pixels and algorithms. A symbol can rise to prominence overnight, spreading through networks like modern folklore. Authority is now negotiated through visibility. Whoever commands attention commands perception. Still, symbols remain necessary. Without them, governance would be invisible, and the shared imagination that binds citizens to law would fragment. Symbols remind people that they are part of something larger, a story written in colors, rituals, and emblems that give abstract institutions emotional weight. The challenge is balance, to keep the performance grounded in principle, so that meaning does not dissolve into spectacle. Ultimately, politics depends on faith in symbols as much as faith in policy. The waving flag, the oath of office, the anthem before a crowd, these gestures weave private citizens into a public whole. When genuine, they elevate civic life. When hollow, they expose its fragility. Either way, they reveal a truth as old as civilization, that power, like belief, endures only as long as people agree to see it. Every major leap in technology reshapes how humanity creates and interprets symbols. From the invention of the printing press to the rise of the internet, each new medium expands not only how people communicate but what they can imagine. Today, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and quantum computing are transforming the symbolic landscape faster than any previous revolution. The signs that once stood for faith, identity, or nation now coexist with icons of circuitry, data clouds, and neural networks, symbols of an emerging world where meaning itself seems to evolve alongside machines. The digital revolution has made symbols dynamic and interactive. Where a word or image on paper was fixed, an icon on a screen can move, glow, or respond. The interface becomes a living text. A click changes color, an animation signals completion, a spinning circle stands for waiting. These subtle cues structure the rhythm of daily life, translating the abstract logic of computation into human expectation. Designers call this feedback, but in a broader sense, it is semiotics in motion, a dialogue between human behavior and technological language. Artificial intelligence introduces a deeper shift. For the first time, non-human systems participate in the creation of symbols. Algorithms generate paintings, write poetry, compose music, and even design new emojis. Machines now imitate imagination, producing images that move human emotion without human intervention. This raises profound questions. When a symbol is made by an algorithm, who authors its meaning? Does emotional response depend on origin, or only on recognition? The boundary between creator and creation blurs, suggesting that symbolism, once humanity's exclusive domain, may be entering a shared frontier. At the same time, technology multiplies meaning through data visualization. Complex realities, climate models, economic trends, genetic maps are condensed into colors, graphs, and networks. These visual abstractions guide decisions that shape nations and lives. In this way, data itself becomes symbolic, numbers that stand for behavior, dots that represent people, lines that trace invisible systems. The challenge is literacy, understanding that every visualization is an interpretation, not reality itself. Behind the beauty of the image lies choice, bias, and assumption. Biotechnology adds another layer of symbolism, blending language and life. The genetic code is written in 4 letters, A, T, C, and G, an alphabet of biology that determines the architecture of every organism. When scientists edit this code, they are, in essence, rewriting the symbolic structure of life. DNA, once considered pure biology, has become a text open to revision. Philosophers call this the semiotics of the living, where meaning is measured not in words but in proteins and patterns. Humanity has become both reader and writer of its own existence. Quantum computing stretches symbolism further into the abstract. Traditional bits represent 0 or 1, but qubits can hold both simultaneously, a state of superposition. This challenges not only computation but thought itself. Binary logic, the foundation of digital language, gives way to probability and paradox. New visual metaphors emerge: waveforms, entanglement diagrams, and interference patterns that defy classical intuition. As understanding deepens, so too does symbolic imagination. The very language of reality is being rewritten to accommodate phenomena beyond direct perception. Technology also generates new rituals around symbols. Online, people perform gestures of presence, likes, shares, reactions that function like modern blessings or applause. Emojis replace facial expression. Memes replace folklore. They are communal shorthand for complex emotion, spreading virally across continents. Semiotic evolution now unfolds in real time, measured not in centuries but in seconds. The speed of symbolic change tests the brain's ability to adapt, demanding constant interpretation of new cues and languages. Yet with this acceleration comes vulnerability. Symbols proliferate faster than meaning can stabilize. Misinformation, deepfakes, and algorithmic manipulation exploit the same visual instincts that once built trust. A single doctored image can distort reality, undermining the symbolic order that sustains social cohesion. The future of symbols thus depends on awareness, the ability to read critically, to question source and intent, to distinguish signal from illusion. Digital literacy has become moral literacy. Still, technology also offers possibilities for deeper connection. Global collaboration, virtual museums, and interactive art dissolve geographic and cultural boundaries. Symbols once limited by language now circulate universally, inviting collective creativity. The same tools that can deceive can also enlighten, expanding empathy through shared visualization and experience. The next frontier may be synthetic consciousness, where machines interpret not just data but meaning. As algorithms learn to analyze context, humor, and metaphor, they begin to participate in the oldest human dialogue, the search for understanding. Whether this marks the rise of partners in thought or reflections of ourselves remains unknown, But the process reveals a constant truth. Symbols evolve with their interpreters. The future of symbolism, then, is not mechanical but relational. Technology will continue to multiply forms of expression, yet the essence of meaning will remain the same, the meeting point between mind and world. Whether carved in stone or coded in light, a symbol is a bridge, and every bridge, however advanced, still leads back to the human desire to connect, comprehend, and create. Among all human experiences, death has inspired the most enduring symbols. From tombs and urns to candles and flowers, societies have always sought to give form to what cannot be fully understood, the end of life and the persistence of memory. Across millennia, people have turned loss into language. The act of memorialization transforms absence into presence, creating a symbolic bridge between the living and the dead. Anthropologists regard funerary rituals as some of the earliest evidence of human consciousness. Burials from tens of thousands of years ago show careful arrangement of bodies, offerings of tools and ornaments, and pigments like ochre used to color the grave. These gestures signify awareness of mortality and the belief that life continues in some form beyond the body. The symbols of burial, earth, stone, flame, express both finality and renewal. They teach that meaning can survive even when matter does not. Every culture has developed its own imagery of passage. The ancient Egyptians placed the heart on a scale to be weighed against a feather, a symbol of moral truth. The Greeks imagined souls crossing the river Styx, guided by a ferryman paid with a coin. In Asia, the burning of incense or paper offerings represents continuity between worlds. Even in secular societies, metaphors of journey persist: the road, the light, the return to stars. Across civilizations, the symbolism of death reveals a shared psychological need to translate grief into story and story into peace. Psychology explains that symbolic ritual helps the living integrate loss. The brain resists the concept of permanent absence. It seeks continuity. Rituals provide structure for that transition, allowing emotion to take shape. Lighting a candle or visiting a grave triggers familiar sensory cues, warmth, scent, texture, that comfort the nervous system. Neuroscientists studying mourning find that symbolic acts activate the same neural pathways associated with attachment and memory. The gesture becomes both remembrance and release. Architecture turns this impulse into enduring form. From pyramids and mausoleums to memorial walls and gardens, structures of remembrance express collective identity through design. Stone and space carry emotion beyond words. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., for example, bears no statues of soldiers, only names engraved in black granite. Visitors see their own reflections alongside the list, a symbolic merging of living and dead. The minimalism of the monument amplifies its power. Meaning arises not from depiction, but from presence. Symbols of death also evolve with technology. Photography, once revolutionary, allowed faces to endure beyond mortality. Later came film, audio, and now digital memory, archives of voice and movement that continue after the body is gone. Social media profiles often remain active as virtual memorials, transforming the internet into a new kind of cemetery, vast and borderless. Each image, each post, becomes a relic, a fragment of consciousness preserved in light and code. The digital age has created what philosophers call ambient immortality, a continuous echo of identity in the networked world. Cultural variations in mourning reflect different understandings of continuity. In Japan, ancestors are honored through home altars. In Mexico, Dia de los Muertos celebrates the return of spirits with color and food. In many African traditions, remembrance rituals emphasize community and renewal rather than sorrow. Yet beneath these differences lies the same symbolic grammar: acknowledgement of transition, reaffirmation of connection, and renewal of meaning. Death does not end the conversation between self and society. It transforms it. Symbols of mourning often invert the colors of celebration. Black, white, gray, and violet dominate funeral customs across cultures, representing quiet, reflection, and humility before mystery. Flowers, with their transient beauty, express the dual truth of life, flourishing and fading. The candle, simple yet profound, remains the universal image of memory. Flame sustained against darkness, fragile yet persistent. Science, too, offers symbolic continuity. The elements that compose the human body, carbon, nitrogen, calcium, and iron, return to the earth and stars after death. In this sense, the metaphor of becoming stardust is not mere poetry but fact. Every atom once belonged to something older and will belong to something new. Death, viewed through science, becomes transformation. The symbolic circle closes. Modern memorials often blend tradition and innovation. Some families scatter ashes in space, plant trees infused with remains, or encode names into microchips orbiting the planet. The methods change, but the message is constant: to be remembered, to remain part of the story. Memory is the true afterlife, sustained by symbols that keep connection alive. Ultimately, the symbolism of death is not about endings but about continuity, the persistence of meaning across time. When people build monuments, write names, or simply hold a photograph, they affirm that the past still speaks. The gestures we inherit from our ancestors remind us that loss is not erasure. Through symbol, absence becomes presence again, and silence becomes memory. In this way, humanity turns the inevitability of death into the art of remembrance, an ongoing dialogue between what has been and what remains. When consciousness rests, the mind does not become silent. Instead, it begins to speak in its own language, one of images, sensations, and shifting meanings. Dreams are the oldest and most intimate form of symbolism, the theatre where thought turns to picture and emotion becomes landscape. Every night, the brain composes its own myths, stitching fragments of memory, fear, and desire into stories that dissolve by morning light. To dream is to enter the original laboratory of the symbol. Anthropologists note that in ancient societies, dreams were often treated as messages from gods or ancestors. Pharaohs consulted dream interpreters before making decisions. Greek temples dedicated to Asclepius invited sleepers to receive healing visions. Indigenous cultures viewed dreaming as a bridge between worlds. These traditions share the intuition that dreams carry meaning, that they translate the unseen workings of the mind into metaphorical form. Modern science no longer invokes divine messengers, but it confirms that dreams are vital to emotional and cognitive balance, a nightly dialogue between consciousness and the subconscious. Neuroscience has illuminated part of this mystery. During REM sleep, rapid eye movement, the brain becomes highly active. Visual and emotional centers light up, while logical and control regions quiet down. This combination allows memory fragments and emotional residues to merge freely, unrestrained by reason. The result is narrative without consistency, emotion without context, the perfect soil for symbols. When a dreamer falls, flies, or finds themselves in unfamiliar rooms, the images are not literal but expressive, reflections of psychological states encoded as metaphor. Psychologists from Freud to Jung turned this understanding into theory. Sigmund Freud described dreams as disguised wish fulfillment, symbols masking repressed desires. Carl Jung, in contrast, saw them as messages from the collective unconscious, populated by archetypes: the hero, the shadow, the child, the mother. In Jung's view, dreams act as compensation, balancing the conscious mind by revealing what it ignores or denies. Both perspectives share a truth still recognized today. The dream transforms emotion into image, using symbolism to make the invisible visible. Modern research has refined these ideas through brain imaging and cognitive science. Dreams help consolidate memory, process emotion, and simulate challenges. Soldiers, for example, often dream of danger after trauma, a symbolic rehearsal that helps the brain integrate fear safely. Students dreaming of exams show improved recall. The metaphors of dreaming thus serve a biological function. They translate experience into resilience. Every symbol the mind invents at night contributes to psychological order by day. Art and culture draw endlessly from this nocturnal language. The surrealists of the 20th century, painters like Dali and Miro, writers like Breton and Aragon, sought to capture the dream's logic on canvas and page. Their distortions of time, space, and form mirror the brain's associative freedom. Even cinema borrows from this tradition. Dissolving scenes, impossible transitions, narratives looping back on themselves. In this sense, the dream world has become a collective art form, influencing how modern humanity visualizes imagination itself. Yet dreams also reveal the limits of interpretation. Unlike deliberate art, they resist stable meaning. The same symbol, a door, a snake, a mirror, may carry different messages depending on the dreamer's life. A door can mean opportunity or fear, a snake wisdom or threat, a mirror self-knowledge or guilt. Each dream is a personal mythology, written anew every night. The mind speaks in private riddles, drawing from shared archetypes but recombining them into unique constellations of meaning. Contemporary neuroscience proposes that dreaming may also play a role in creativity. During REM sleep, associations form that would never occur in waking logic. Scientists, musicians, and inventors have all reported insights emerging from dreams: the structure of benzene, the melody of a symphony, the resolution of a problem. The symbolic mode of the sleeping brain seems to dissolve boundaries between disciplines, linking memory fragments into novel patterns. In this sense, dreams continue the same symbolic work as art and science, transforming data into revelation. Dream symbols are not confined to sleep. Daydreams, fantasies, and imagination use the same neural networks. They blur the line between inner and outer worlds, suggesting that consciousness itself is built from the same fabric as dreams, an ongoing narrative that interprets reality through metaphor. The distinction between sleeping and waking thought may be one of degree, not kind. In both, the mind tells stories to make sense of experience. The symbolic language of dreams reminds us that meaning begins within. Before words or art, before science or religion, humans dreamed, and in those dreams, they discovered that imagination could turn feeling into form. The dream is the mind's oldest canvas, endlessly repainting emotion into imagery, creating private worlds from the materials of memory. To dream is to participate in the ancient craft of symbol making, where every image, however strange, is the psyche's attempt to speak. Every word, gesture, and image humans create is part of a vast network of signs, a system so pervasive that it defines perception itself. The discipline devoted to studying this network is semiotics, the science of meaning. While language studies focus on grammar and vocabulary, semiotics looks deeper, asking how meaning happens at all. It treats everything, from literature to traffic lights, architecture to emojis, as text to be read. The world, through this lens, becomes a grand conversation of symbols. The term semiotics comes from the Greek semeion, meaning sign. Its roots reach back to ancient philosophers who saw communication as the bridge between mind and matter. But the field took shape in the 20th century, guided by two thinkers often considered its founders, Ferdinand de Saussure and Charles Sanders Peirce. Saussure emphasized the structural nature of signs, each composed of a signifier, form, and a signified concept. Their connection, he argued, is arbitrary. What matters is the relationship among signs within a system. Peirce approached meaning as dynamic, describing a triad of sign, object, and interpretant, the mind's understanding of the connection. Together, their ideas created a framework that continues to shape how we analyze communication, culture, and perception. Semiotics shows that meaning is not a property of things but of relationships. A red light means stop only because a community agrees it does. Remove that agreement, and the symbol collapses into color without consequence. In this sense, the act of interpretation is creative. The brain constructs meaning by linking signals to experience, forming an internal model of the world. Every act of reading, whether of a poem or a facial expression, is an act of translation from form to significance. This principle extends beyond language. In visual art, lines and colors form a symbolic syntax. In music, tone and rhythm create emotional signifiers. In fashion, fabric and silhouette communicate identity. Even silence and absence can signify, precisely because humans read context instinctively. Semiotics calls this the continuum of signification, the idea that everything within perception participates in meaning, whether deliberate or accidental. Modern semioticians have applied this science to nearly every aspect of culture. Roland Barthes analyzed advertisements and photographs, revealing how everyday images conceal ideologies. A simple picture of a family meal might encode notions of happiness, class, and gender. Umberto Eco expanded the field into philosophy, suggesting that culture itself is a vast semiotic system in constant negotiation. Every film, brand, or news headline becomes a sign among signs, influencing how societies think and behave. Semiotics thus bridges humanities and sciences, revealing patterns of interpretation that govern both storytelling and social structure. Cognitive science supports these insights at a neurological level. The brain processes signs through pattern recognition and association, drawing from prior experience to predict meaning. When you see a chair, your mind recalls every chair encountered before, forming an abstract category. The physical object is recognized only because the symbolic memory exists first. This predictive mechanism underlies not only perception but also language, art, and mathematics. Reality, in a sense, is continuously interpreted through the symbols stored within the mind. Semiotics also explains why misunderstanding is inevitable. Because meaning arises through context, no symbol can ever be completely fixed. A word that inspires comfort in one culture may cause offense in another. A gesture of agreement may look like rejection elsewhere. Polysemy, the coexistence of multiple meanings, ensures that communication remains fluid, alive, and contested. Every act of reading, from casual conversation to scholarly analysis, involves negotiation between intention and interpretation. The digital age has magnified the relevance of semiotics. Online communication relies heavily on icons, memes, and visual shorthand. A single emoji can carry humor, sarcasm, or affection depending on context. Algorithms translate human behavior into data, another layer of symbolic mediation. Artificial intelligence now generates text and imagery, creating new signs without conscious intent. Semiotics offers tools to navigate this complexity, helping society question how meaning is constructed, shared, and manipulated in a world where symbols move faster than reflection. Even science itself depends on semiotic systems. Mathematical notation, chemical formulas, and genetic codes are languages of precision, built from symbols that stand for physical reality. When a physicist writes E equals mc squared, they compress the behavior of matter and energy into a brief symbolic equation. The symbol becomes more powerful than the phenomena it describes, a reminder that knowledge advances through the refinement of meaning. Ultimately, semiotics teaches that reality and representation are intertwined. To understand the world is to interpret it, and to interpret it is to participate in its creation. The human mind is not merely a receiver of symbols, but their author, continually shaping the shared web of meaning that defines culture and consciousness. The study of signs, then, is not an academic curiosity but a mirror of life itself. Everything that can be seen, heard, or imagined carries significance because the act of noticing transforms it into symbol. Semiotics gives that transformation a name, and through it we begin to see that the story of meaning is the story of humanity, endlessly rewritten in the signs we leave behind. Symbols are humanity's most continuous dialogue, an unbroken exchange between mind, matter, and meaning that stretches from the first painted walls to the light of a digital screen. Every gesture, number, image, and word is a contribution to that conversation, a response to the ancient question of how to make thought visible. Across time, symbols have carried the memory of civilizations, the emotions of individuals, and the discoveries of science. They are how humanity remembers itself. The story of symbols is also the story of continuity. The same impulse that led an ancestor to carve a spiral into stone drives a scientist to write an equation, an artist to paint abstraction, or a coder to design an icon. Each seeks to represent the invisible, an idea, a feeling, a pattern, through something others can perceive. In that act, the private becomes collective. Meaning passes from one mind to another, surviving the limits of time and mortality. Over millennia, symbols have evolved, yet their purpose remains constant: to connect. Cave drawings became hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphs evolved into alphabets. Alphabets transformed into binary code. Still, each step serves the same function: compression of thought into form. The medium changes, but the gesture is eternal, a human being reaching outward through representation. Every new technology merely extends the radius of this reach. Philosophers describe this continuity as the semiotic spiral. Meaning begets new symbols, which create new meanings, which demand yet more symbols. Culture grows through this recursion, expanding its vocabulary of ideas. Religion, science, politics, and art are all branches of the same symbolic tree. Its roots lie in perception, its leaves in imagination. The health of civilization depends on its ability to read, reinterpret, and renew its own signs. Yet, for all their permanence, symbols remain fragile. Their power exists only as long as people agree on what they signify. When belief fades or context changes, a symbol can fall silent. Ancient scripts become undeciphered marks. Once sacred emblems turn decorative. But even then, they leave echoes, shapes that still invite curiosity, waiting to be read again. In this way, every symbol carries a dual nature: permanence of form, impermanence of meaning. The conversation never ends because the participants always change. Today, humanity inhabits a world dense with symbols, logos glowing on towers, icons pulsing on screens, data flowing invisibly through networks. The challenge is no longer scarcity of signs, but excess. The skill required now is interpretation, to distinguish between the meaningful and the manipulative, between communication and noise. Semiotic awareness becomes a form of wisdom, enabling people to navigate complexity without losing clarity. Still, there is beauty in this abundance. Never before has humanity been so connected by its shared systems of representation. A symbol born in one corner of the planet can inspire understanding in another within seconds. Languages, art forms, and disciplines intertwine, forming a planetary tapestry of meaning. Technology, far from erasing the symbolic tradition, has made it universal. At its heart, the world's symbolic conversation is an act of empathy. Every sign, from a mathematical formula to a musical note, from a gesture of greeting to a work of art, is an invitation to understanding. It asks the observer to enter another's perspective, to translate perception into shared experience. This mutual recognition is what transforms isolated intelligence into civilization. Perhaps this is why the study of symbols feels both intellectual and intimate. It reveals that meaning is not stored in books or systems, but in the ongoing interaction between minds. Each generation inherits symbols and reshapes them, adding nuance, questioning assumptions, layering new significance atop old. In that process, humanity remains in dialogue with its own history, a conversation that spans epochs and still continues, quietly, every time one person looks at a mark and feels that it means. The conversation of symbols has no final word. Every sign points beyond itself, inviting another interpretation, another creation. Like life, it renews itself through variation and connection. To live among symbols is to participate in that renewal, to read, to respond, and to contribute new expressions of understanding. Symbols endure because they embody what is most human, the desire to find pattern in chaos, to give order to experience, to make the fleeting permanent through form. They are our fingerprints on time, small, distinct, and endlessly overlapping. And as long as there are minds capable of recognizing meaning, the dialogue will go on, infinite, unfinished, and alive.